Good afternoon, everybody. We're a little short of members on the committee because of session and the possibility of snow and sleet the next few days. So the appropriations committees, subcommittees are meeting on top of us, and other members will be coming in. But so that we can start, in case the projections will be wrong and it starts to snow and sleet later when we're not out, I'm going to go ahead and start the meeting. To the committee members, we are not discussing House Bill 885 today. This is a hearing, and I think Alan came up and we talked on, I think, Wednesday or Thursday evening that we would have a substitute for you. It is not ready yet, and there will be other meetings for that. So that is why there is no bill in your folders. With that, we'll begin. Representative Peake. And before that, if we are under the fire marshal's rules, so if the room becomes too full, you may find that they will have to ask somebody to leave. If you are a speaker, an invited speaker, please let us know and we'll ask somebody else to leave under the circumstances. There will be a hearing for public comment on the use of medical marijuana for children with intractable seizures. I had that scheduled for Thursday, but depending on the weather, that hearing is sort of fluid. But we will schedule a meeting. If we have to cancel Thursday, there will be a meeting for public hearing on that topic. So, sorry, Alan.
That's okay.
Representative Peake.
Make sure we're on. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm only going to take a few minutes to chat briefly about HB 885, as we have folks that have come a long way and have taken time from their busy schedules to be here with us today. I do want each of you to know that 5 weeks ago, I would not have touched the medical cannabis issue with a 10-foot pole. But then I met a little 4-year-old girl named Haley Cox and listened to her parents' story of how she was suffering from up to 100 seizures a day, and how their only hope at this point was to uproot their family and move to Colorado, away from their support systems, their church, their friends, their jobs, to obtain medical cannabis that was showing amazing positive results in children with seizure disorders. This cannabidiol oil is legal in Colorado, but not in Georgia. So we set out to draft a bill that would allow these children to obtain this oil-based medical cannabis that has extremely low levels of THC, the part that makes you high, and elevated levels of CBD, the part that has therapeutic effects. And I believe we've done just that. The bill as drafted is very restricted and tightly regulated. It's managed by doctors at academic medical centers. It's limited in scope to seizure disorders and applied in an oil-based form taken orally. The bill, as drafted, has been given the public support of both the medical community and law enforcement, including MAG, the Medical Association of Georgia, the largest physician association in our state, Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, also known as CHOA, which includes Eggleston and Scottish Rite Pediatric Hospitals, the Georgia chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Georgia Academy of Family Physicians, and the Georgia Sheriff's Association. Our biggest challenge so far is how do we get the medical cannabis to Georgia in a way that's legal, safe, tested, and controlled. We are still evaluating every option at this point. 20 other states have already have laws allowing medical cannabis, and 13 states are currently evaluating legislation to permit the use of medical cannabis. Our bill would be the most restrictive to date in the U.S. I want to be very, very clear. We are not legalizing medical cannabis beyond what is already in Georgia code, except for seizure disorders. We are not legalizing cannabis for recreational purposes, and I will fight that attempt at every angle. We are not legalizing medical cannabis in any smoking method, but only in an oil-based form that looks just like this. You will hear today from the manufacturers of the cannabidiol oil, which has been given the name Charlotte's Web on behalf of Charlotte Figge, the first recipient of the cannabis oil almost 2 years ago. You will also hear from the medical community and from Georgia families who are faced with moving or have already moved their families just to have the choice to utilize medical cannabis for their children. I hope you will keep an open mind today and ask yourself, what would you do if it was your child that was fighting a seizure disorder? How would that change your mindset about this legislation if you were facing the same tough choices as these Georgia families? I'm grateful that 20 members of this committee are co-sponsors of HB 885, and I look forward to a healthy debate regarding this potentially life-changing bill. We now have a very short video that will give you some background on how and why this discussion has become such a hot topic in our state. Madam Chair, with your permission, we'd like to show the video.
Sure.
By the time she was 2, though, the seizures had become constant and started to take their toll on their once happy, joyful little girl.
She started to really decline cognitively, and she was slipping away, and she just wasn't keeping up with her twin.
The Figgies finally found an answer. It was awful news. Dravet syndrome. It is severe, intractable epilepsy. The seizures start during the first year of life and are unstoppable, difficult to control, and very damaging. For the next 2 years, the Figgies tried everything. Strange diets, acupuncture, and dozens of powerful drugs like Valium, Ativan, phenobarbital. But nothing seemed to help. Even worse, some of the medications nearly killed her.
After 1 dose, she stops breathing, and after 2 doses, her heart will stop.
Did you have to do CPR then on her yourself?
Yes. I remember when her heart stopped, and I had her pulse, and I lost her pulse. There was just nothing. The ambulance is on its way.
She survived.
Mommy's here.
But now it was fall of 2011, and Charlotte was 5 years old.
When things were at their worst, she just sees all night, and the kids are sleeping either in my room or next to her. They can hear her, the seizure scream all night, 50 times a night. And Chase would come in the morning and just, this is her twin, and just hug her and like rub her head and say, I'm just so glad you survived through the night last night.
Matt had been deployed to Afghanistan, and the only thing he could do to help was start scouring the internet. And he stumbled onto this video of a child using marijuana.
So how's everything going? Jane had 4 days without a seizure.
I'm like, wow, this having success on specifically Dravet, this is interesting. It's natural.
And while he couldn't ever imagine taking marijuana himself, he was now in the stunning position of recommending it for Charlotte.
I was like, we need to do this.
And I said, I don't know. There you are.
And then Charlotte's condition got worse. 300 seizures a week, almost 2 every hour. She was not talking or moving, basically catatonic. As a last resort, doctors wanted to either prescribe a powerful veterinary drug used on epileptic dogs or put Charlotte in a medically induced coma so her brain and body could rest. For Paige, those were not good options. But maybe, just maybe, marijuana now was. Here's how scientists think it might work. Marijuana is made up of 2 ingredients. THC, that's the psychoactive part that makes you high, and CBD, also called cannabidiol. It's the CBD that scientists think modulates electrical and chemical activity to help quiet the excessive activity in the brain that causes seizures. Behind closed doors and under tight security, we enter what the Stanleys call the Garden of Eden.
There's nothing like this in the world. This plant's 21% CBD and less than 1% THC.
It took years of crossbreeding plants to get to this point.
Instead of breeding up the THC, we've bred down the THC and bred up the CBD. And people said, you're crazy. You know, who's going to smoke that?
So why grow it then? Well, the Stanleys also believed in CBD's potential to treat many diseases. It was January 2012, Afghanistan. About 7,000 miles away from his family in Colorado, Matt Figge received this video from his wife, Paige.
It's horrible seeing these videos when I'm deployed.
It was his 5-year-old daughter, Charlotte, seizing. Diagnosed with a severe form of epilepsy, she was having 300 seizures a week. Each attack so severe, it had the potential to kill her. They had already tried dozens of high-powered drugs.
We needed to try something else, and at that point in time, marijuana was that natural course of action to try.
At home in Colorado, Paige searched for marijuana high in CBD. That's the ingredient some scientists think helps seizures, and also low in THC. Remember, she didn't want to get her daughter stoned. She found a small amount at a Denver dispensary. The owner was surprised that anyone would even want it.
They said it's funny because no one buys this, you know. That was the general consensus, that nobody wanted it. It didn't have any effect.
Paige paid $800 for a small bag and took it home.
I had a friend that was starting a business on making medicine, and I said, can you help me extract the medicine from this bag of marijuana? I measured it with a syringe and squirted it under her tongue. It was exciting and very nerve-wracking.
Holding Charlotte in her arms, Paige waited. An hour ticked by, and then another, and then another.
She didn't have a seizure that day, and then she didn't have a seizure that night.
Did you sit there and look at your watch? And...
Right, I thought, this is crazy. And then she didn't have one the next day, and then the next day, and I thought, she would have had 100 by now. And I just thought, this is insane.
I remember how happy Paige was. Like, it's really working. I can't believe it. Yeah, that was pretty amazing to hear.
It had worked. Charlotte was the first of those kids. Late spring 2012, she tried the Stanley Special Marijuana. And again, it worked.
I can't tell you what that means to us.
Get you, doesn't it, a little bit?
If it doesn't get you, something's wrong with you. She lived her life in a catatonic state. Now her parents get to meet her for the first time. What a revelation.
Yeah, gee.
The child who had had 300 seizures a week was now down to just one every 7 days.
Pitter pat, tiptoe.
When I first met Charlotte, March of 2013, it was 1 year after that first dose of marijuana. Achoo! After almost 2 years on a feeding tube, she was now eating on her own.
Yellow?
She was talking, even walking.
Yeah, please, she said, please.
And while scientists are still at the very early stages of knowing if this is actually happening, I can tell you it was remarkable to see her progress. In the 3 months since we first met her, we saw a change. She was now talking more.
Say puppy. Yeah.
She's horseback riding.
Good girl.
She even rides a bike on her own. And the special strain made for Charlotte is now named for her. It's Charlotte's Web.
It is Charlotte's plant.
It's Charlotte's plant. Not anymore. Now it's for all the children.
More than 41 children are using Charlotte's Web here in Colorado. All of them are reporting significant seizure reduction. And there are dozens more on a wait list, hoping, praying that a plant could change their lives, just like it did for Charlotte.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing us to show it again. This is not the cannabidiol oil. This is exactly what it looks like, and that's how it's administered to these kids. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we have some folks here to testify.
Okay. Paige Figge, I believe the mama that was the star of this program was their daughter. Welcome to Georgia. Where are you from?
Colorado.
Oh, always Colorado?
I'm from Connecticut originally. I came out for college, met my husband in Colorado out there, yeah. Thank you for having me here today. Thank you for hearing this, about this bill. So I won't go too much into the Charlotte update, except I will say we're 2 years into treatment. She's 2 years off of her pharmaceutical drugs with Dravet syndrome. That's extremely rare, maybe the only in the world with this level of seizure control off of pharmaceuticals. She had failed all of the options by 2 years old. Some of these drugs she had failed within a day, within 24 hours, very severely medically failed these drugs. Some of the drugs, I would say the majority of the medicine that she had tried before this oil was non-FDA approved under a 2-year-old child. Some was imported from other countries. So when we had really reached the end of the line to reach out to medical cannabis, and believe me, I had done my research before trying this on my child. She's very medically fragile. She couldn't walk, talk, eat. She was a 1-month-old, essentially. And before trying this, I had done my research, and I was actually shocked and angry to find that there is quite a bit of published medical research done on cannabis, on cannabidiol, essentially, for epilepsy. Hundreds of years this has been used to treat epilepsy. I gave it a shot. I found the Stanley brothers. They reluctantly agreed to treat Charlotte, and we're 2 years successful now. She remains 99.8% seizure-free. She has more seizures in 1 year, 2 years now, than she had in 1 day before we began. But that's not good enough. This is just one anecdotal case. We are now treating in Colorado over 300 patients on the oil, over 200 pediatric cases of very severe life-limiting cases on this oil. And we're studying this. It's not, this is parent-driven. We're a nonprofit. So the parents are running this volunteer organization. Most of the parents are treating their children with the oil, and we are demanding science. So unfortunately for Joel Stanley, who will also speak here, who's creating the medicine for Charlotte and these 300 children, it's not profitable to study this. To do an FDA-approved clinical trial on a Schedule I substance is nearly impossible. We are going to study the whole plant compound, the Charlotte's Web oil, because that's what's working in humans. And I know there's some other studies happening around the country for isolated compounds. The typical FDA clinical trial is one compound isolated. There's 400, arguably, phytochemicals in the plant. We may never know in our lifetime which is working on what and what mechanism in epilepsy this oil is working. But none of the parents using Charlotte's Web oil want to try anything different. They would like to study this. So we're going to go forward with an FDA clinical, double-blind, placebo clinical trial. We're doing mouse models in Utah. We're doing genetic sequencing on the patients, on the responders versus the non-responder group. We had to wait, actually, because we didn't have enough non-responders. The research that was done, the anecdotal retrospective research, the case studies, shows an 85% efficacy. 85% of our population has 50 to 100% seizure control. Charlotte's 99.8% seizure control is not the most successful case. She was just the first child in Colorado to be treated. So I think when you speak to doctors and neurologists, they're looking for another tool in their toolbox. Intractable epilepsy, untreatable epilepsy is very severe. These children, it is life-limiting. They're not going to live to adulthood. They will die from these syndromes. So what we're discussing here is not a medicine with a potential for abuse. This is a non-psychoactive, not attractive to the recreational market oil. And it's not smoked, like Representative Peak explained. And the children that are using this oil, 100 of them in Colorado have moved, have had to become medical refugees, if you will, and move to Colorado. They cannot leave Colorado. Charlotte, I would have brought her here today so you could see the success she's having, but she can't leave the state of Colorado. It's illegal for her to travel outside of the state with her medicine, and she cannot come off of this medicine, or her seizures, her 1,200 seizures a month will return. So I think that the statistics show that this is worth looking at. I think the argument from neurology, from pediatric neurologists, that we just don't know enough, we would like to know more, I find it irresponsible. The parents that will speak today find it irresponsible when they say we want to know more, but then the parents are left to run a clinical trial on this medicine that's illegal to study. So we're asking for a little leeway to treat these very, very severe intractable pediatric epilepsies in the state of Georgia, so that the families, like some of the ones behind me, that have left your state to come to Colorado, that they can come back home and use a safe medicine to treat their child so they do not pass away. I've had multiple friends lose children in multiple states on waiting lists with a non-working cannabis program, waiting to get access to this oil, and to no avail, and they've passed away. They've lost their child. They will not know if they are going to fall into that 85% rate or not. So I think some of the fears are that some of the things I hear is that this is a gateway drug. Charlotte will not drive a car, get married, live independently ever in her life. For us, what I've seen is not a gateway drug. This is a non-addictive substance. This has been an exit drug for us, as is seen by her, the removal of her pharmaceutical drugs. That were actually, the side effects were worse than the seizures that the drugs were not even controlling. Seizures are a side effect of every drug we saw that side effect of every seizure drug we tried. Liver failure, death, these are side effects. These are life-altering side effects. And you're still dealing with the seizures that they're not controlling. So these parents are just asking for another option to try. This drug has a well-documented safety profile. If you are a doctor or researcher, you know this. You have access to these articles. These parents don't have time to wait for an FDA clinical trial. Despite that we're doing this, this is a 7 to 10 year to market option, the FDA gold standard, which I agree with. But it's 7 to 10 years. Most of the children in here with their life-limiting epilepsy do not have 7 to 10 years. That's the conundrum with studying a Schedule I substance. Is it's illegal to study, and it's Schedule I because it's illegal to study. So we just don't know, and it's frankly, like I said, and these parents will testify to, it is irresponsible that we are not taking a better look at this. I think also the pharmaceutical model, while worth looking at and worth waiting for, is also cost prohibitive. The nonprofit model that we're supporting in Colorado at 5 cents a milligram forever is much less than the cost of some of the orphan drugs that Charlotte was using in her lifetime. Thousands of dollars a month. Her medicine now costs $150 a month. And so I just really thank you for having me. I just want you to really take a look at this new tool for neurologists to use, and fight for these parents in Georgia who are asking for a non-abusable substance. Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't say to the committee we were going to hold questions till the end, but with Ms. Figge, I'll let you go ahead. We are on a very tight schedule. We have an hour for, as I told Representative Peake, for presenters and questions, and an hour for another group of people. So, Representative Watson, I'll take 1 or 2 questions on this.
Thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just real briefly, how many drugs did Charlotte try before?
About a dozen, 12 to 13.
And you said some of them were non-FDA approved?
That's correct.
And obviously the side effects are significant. The randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled, there is a trial going on?
We are beginning to work toward that.
And who is running that?
Dr. Edward Ma is going to run that. He's a Denver adult epileptologist. Dr. Orrin Davinsky at NYU is going to oversee our trial. He's also running the GW trial at NYU.
Okay, thank you. And last question, has or should the FDA allow more leeway with studies?
I think so. I think the FDA should look at this, and perhaps the federal government should deschedule this, at least the cannabidiol portion, the non-psychoactive portion of the plant.
Thank you.
Okay, that's the only question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Joel Stanley.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Joel Stanley. I'm one of several brothers who have bred this plant, Charlotte's Web, that you were just watching the video about. It's an honor to be here, and it's been an honor to be a part of this and a part of these families' lives. I wanted to handle a few common misconceptions about our group and about what's happening in Colorado, simply because, for time's sake, usually media doesn't get around to it. But a few misconceptions is that, these medicines are being made and that they're not tested, that they're not safe. Basically, that what we're doing in Colorado isn't legitimate, isn't on the level. But the fact of the matter is that in Colorado we have very strict regulations for which pesticides we're allowed to use, things like that. But our group takes it a step further, and we follow good manufacturing practices as set out by the FDA for nutritional supplements, vitamin supplements, other plant extracts and supplements such as this. Also, our method of extraction is commonly used by pharmaceutical companies, and including the pharmaceutical company out of the UK that's currently engaged in studies. We use food-grade ethanol, and we use a process to recapture the ethanol very similar to any lab in the country or out of country for pharmaceuticals. Our head chemist was actually recruited. He has 14 years experience, including 5 years experience with Pfizer Pharmaceutical, isolating and testing for plant compounds. So it's often seen in the media, if you've been looking this up, looking at some of the media stories, with a parent just kind of squirting some kind of oil into a child's mouth. Well, that oil is actually known. It's a known quantity, exactly how many milligrams of cannabidiol are actually in this per milliliter. So parents are able to titrate dosing just like they would any other drug. We use the standard and preferred methods for plant compound identification and quantification, which is HPLC. Sorry if I'm moving really quickly. I just want to make sure that I get through this so that you all can hear from the parents behind me. We're not here to put down the FDA, to put down any other products or elevate our product. We're in favor of clinical trials, and the fact of the matter is that for the last 85 years, we've been blocked from research of these compounds known as cannabinoids within the plant. That's starting to open up, we're seeing. We're very excited about that, but we're all for the FDA processes of clinical trials, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. But the fact of the matter is that this has been locked out, so it's brand new. But what I want to point out about our group and some others is that we're engaged in conversations with the NINDS, which is a division of the National Institute of Health. They have a program known as the Anticonvulsant Screening Program. Now this program, every anti-epileptic drug on the market has gone through this program at the University of Utah. Just recently, I was sent our application to this program. So it's not that the federal government isn't interested in looking at this, it's just that this is brand new. So we're all for going through those processes, FDA, getting DEA approval for research, all of that. In fact, I just received a letter of intent from the University of Colorado based on the new farm bill in which hemp can be researched in states like Colorado where it's legal. Also, I spent some time speaking with Dr. El Soli of the University of Mississippi. Now, this is the only university that has the ability to grow and research right now under the DEA. We've engaged those conversations, and we're speaking about getting a letter of intent probably this week. So we're going through those processes. I want you to know that and understand that. That's often left out. But the real big deal about this is that these families behind me and families across the U.S. and across the world, many of them have exhausted all of their pharmaceutical options. They're already on to drugs that are not FDA approved, or not FDA approved for their small children anyway. They're already on to those, and they're failing them. There's about 50 to 60 million people affected by epilepsy in the world, and of those 30 to 40% are considered intractable, conventionally untreatable by what modern medicine currently has to offer through the pharmaceutical model. Many of these folks just simply don't have time. Now, there's also the argument that there's not enough known about cannabidiol or cannabis in general. Well, the fact of the matter is that there's a plethora of research that's been done, mostly preclinical, in vitro, mouse model, but there's also clinical research that has been done specifically for compounds like this, even whole plant compounds, as it pertains to seizure reductions. So there is evidence there. There's, what I would consider for something that hasn't gone through the FDA process, a known safety profile for sure. And I would encourage you to pore over the articles on PubMed Look through the research. Look and see what's been done so far over the last 30 years. It's actually pretty astounding. It's just not really brought to the light. So I want to talk a little bit about current options.
We are on a time schedule, and
Sure.
we have some questions. So,
Okay.
as I said before, you can make it succinct.
Okay, just one more point that I'll make. The parents behind me, the folks behind me, and in general, these are just people who love their kids. They don't fit any stereotype. They're not pot activists, and neither am I. In fact, I don't even use the plant. But I want you to keep that in mind. Please listen to their stories, hear their hearts, and just hear what they're going through.
Okay, thank you. We do have some questions. We have 4 questions, and I'll take them into the members. I would also ask you to be very brief because of time. Representative Wilkinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Stanley, thank you very much for making this trip. And it's not a short one. I have a cousin who's a law professor at Boulder, and I know, so thank you. But I really am trying to get a handle on the approval process. And are you all in the approval process?
Yes, we've engaged in preclinical through the SAP program that I mentioned with the NIH. That's one step usually taken for these AEDs, anti-epileptic drugs. But it's still one of those issues where this is cultivated in a medical marijuana state under medical marijuana regulations. This is all brand new, even to the federal government. I don't think anyone actively wants to block this from being researched. We have a plethora of albeit anecdotal evidence in Colorado. It's still a lot of evidence there. So,
I think what Representative Wilson is asking is, are you in the process for FDA approval?
Yeah.
Yes.
In the beginning process of
yes.
Formal FDA approval, yeah.
Yes, very beginning, and I will say that that's going to take some time, just like the current trials of the current potential drug on the market is going to take a lot of time, and these families don't have that time, but we do want to get through those processes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Representative Reinders.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I apologize for just not knowing, so I appreciate you getting up to speed. You have facilities and lab where you do this at? Do they have to have any kind of approval?
Yes. The basic approval for our lab would be the Colorado Health Department. 2 times a year, we have to be inspected, just like any facility that's.
Is there an independent group that comes and oversees your work or your research?
Yes, absolutely. We're in probably one of the most highly regulated industries on the planet. The medical marijuana in Colorado, anyway, is highly regulated by the state.
And would that include being approved by FDA?
No.
No, they don't have to approve you? Or
No.
you're not approved?
No, we're operating under state regulatory, not federal.
Thank you. And one other question, if I may, Madam Chair. Help me understand, if you're making this, would there be any kind of concern we should have as a state or any other state in the transport of that from state lines? And I know that may be an obvious question, but I've heard that. Explain to me how that works.
Sure.
If you brought it from Colorado here, is that a violation of?
Right now it is. Right now it is. But what I would say to that is that institutions like the University of Colorado, the University of Mississippi, would have the ability under DEA license to interface with your institutions here, which I think that your bill here is actually very restrictive, but well written for research purposes. And I do not believe that the obstacles to get this from Colorado to a legitimate institution in Georgia are insurmountable at all.
Thank you.
Okay, Representative Peake.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Stanley, real quick, how many children are currently using Charlotte's Web, and what's the results? And second question, what is the cost per month to the average family that's for this medicine?
Sure. So we have, the last count is 202 children in Colorado. Over 100 families have moved from other states to Colorado after watching the documentary we just saw a clip of. And the average results, we're having about 85% response. That's above 50% seizure reduction, and of those, the average seizure reduction is between 80 and 90%. That's what's reported. We're engaged in retrospective and prospective case data analysis on those results as well. So that's where those come from. The average cost, for example, Charlotte, her medicine on a monthly basis would cost around $160, $170. I would say a slightly larger average, just going by a larger child, would be maybe $200 to $250 per month. Whereas, to put that into perspective, the orphan drugs and off-label prescriptions are oftentimes $2,000 to, who knows, $20,000 per month.
Right. Representative Broadwick.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Last question.
Yes, Mr. Stanley, thank you very much for being here with us and sharing the information. Question I've got is, certainly you have an isolated strain of cannabis with this product, and because it's a natural product, there may be variations, and my question would be, you showed a quantitative analysis of one of the products. How much variation do you find one lot to another as far as quantitative analysis of the THC and CBD?
Sure.
Is there significant variation, or is it within your study limits of what you've set?
It's not significant. For example, we would call Charlotte's Web its ratio of a compound like CBD to a compound like THC of around 28 to 1. That's the highest we know of. That's been touted out there, but it stays within that range. Now, of course, it is a plant, and season to season that may vary slightly, based on anything having to do with the UV index to the barometric pressure. Well, at the same time, we're also working towards standardizing exactly that average plant compound combination. So we have a specific plant profile and its averages of plant terpenes and cannabinoids. Those can each be isolated. My chemist can do that all day long. He can isolate them, pair them back together, and have something completely standardized. At the same time, we have a wait list of over 2,000 people nationally and internationally. So while we're working toward the standardization so that it's not feared as a plant extract, it's very important that we also supply these for those families that are out of options.
Okay.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Stanley. Okay. Dr. James Smith. And Dr. Smith, you'll tell us who you are. I know you have a daughter that suffers from seizures, but you will.
That's Madam Chair. Is somebody who handles the tech, can they pull up the presentation for me? They were here earlier.
We'll probably have to get him. Okay, while we wait for that, Dr. Green, we can move along. Dr. Smith, we'll get you somebody to help you, but let me let Dr. Green go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the ability to speak with the committee this afternoon. My name is Mike Green. I'm a family practice physician from Macon. I serve as the chair of the Council on Legislation for the Medical Association of Georgia. I'm a board member, and I'm here to explain why MAG is supportive of this bill. We looked at the pros and cons of this about an hour and a half in our last board meeting 2 or 3 weeks ago. After a lot of debate, a lot of questions, we unanimously supported moving forward with this bill. A lot of the whys and wherefores you've already heard. This is not a recreational drug. This is not a euphoric drug. In fact, I would posit that this is not marijuana. This is an extract and a chemical from a plant. This has been a way we've made made medications for hundreds of years. Digoxin, for example, comes from a plant called foxglove. It was a plant extract initially. So this is right along the lines of what we've done in the past. we felt that the structure of the bill was such that it gave adequate safeguards. It put it under the general auspices of the Composite Medical Board and was done through academic medical centers with institutional review boards and rigorous scientific oversight and the way the programs were run. But it also gave a mechanism to be able to help those patients that are failing standard therapies but can't go to Colorado for various reasons, or can't split their families, they can't leave their jobs, or they can't get on the waiting list right now. I know there's always a lot of hot discussion when you bring up marijuana. We want to be absolutely clear that we in no shape or form support recreational use of marijuana, nor do we support smoking marijuana for medicinal purposes. We are supporting the cannabinoid, the extract, to be given as the oil orally under controlled settings. Now, outside of my role as a board member, I'm a physician. I have 5 or 6 patients in my practice with intractable seizures. I'm not their primary treating physician for their seizures, but I treat everything else. And I can tell you, as you probably could tell from the clip, that if you have a family member with this, your family is consumed with this. You have no life outside of caring for your child. And you live every day in fear, is your child going to wake up the next morning? Yes, we have seizure drugs, and for many children they're effective, but for an unfortunately significant percentage, they're not. And when they're not, where do the pediatric neurologists go now? There's 2 things generally when you fail the prescription medicines. One is called a vagal nerve stimulator, where it's implanted and you get electrical impulses. And the other one is really the biggie. When you go to a parent and says, we're not working with your seizures, we'd now like to cut your child's brain in half. Because that's what they do. They sever the middle of the brain and attempt to stop these. So we're behind the proper use, the proper study, the proper control, and getting this to a mechanism that allows access to these patients who have basically failed all other therapy. Thank you.
Okay, there's no questions. Have you got you going? Okay. How long is this?
I'm not going to go through the whole thing there. I apologize. Originally, the time frame has changed, so I'm going to speed through it, hit some high points. So, epilepsy and cannabidiol. We've already spoken about epilepsy, the effects it has on the U.S. population, intractable epilepsy. We've spoken about the 2 main components, cannabidiol and THC. I do want people to know, as we've emphasized before, there is significant research out there that's been done for a long time. We know the receptors, we know the interactions, we know the pharmacology of anti-inflammatory effects on the brain, neuroprotective effects. There's 40 years of research to animal studies dating back to 1973, recent animal studies from 2010, and current animal studies recently published in Seizure 2012. All of these showed significant decrease in the numbers of seizures, the intensity of seizures, and deaths from seizures. It's been used for thousands of years. It was used in the United States up until 1937. There's actually human research studies with cannabidiol in 1978. It was a German study. In that study, 50% of patients treated with CBD became seizure-free by 3 months. There was a follow-up study in 1980 that was in line with these findings, and then it kind of drops off. It became out of, not vogue with a lot of the pharmacology. A 2013 retrospective study done out of Stanford showed that greater than 80% reduction in seizure frequency of over half of the children. That is very compelling. 11% of these participants reported complete remission. 63% of those children that had improvement were able to be weaned off other anti-epileptic drugs. The families reported better mood, increased alertness, better sleep, decreased self-stimulation. Negative side effects were drowsiness and fatigue. Currently, there is a human research study that just got orphan approval of Epidemics. It actually was scheduled to begin in January 2014. New York University is one of the pre-selected 125 patients with Dravet syndrome. My wife and I actually contacted them, and as of the 6th of this month, that's a closed study. They're not taking on any more patients for this round. But it is in the purified cannabidiol form that they were referring to earlier. Charlotte's Web, we've spoken about that. It's enriched with a ratio that 17% is what I had, but it sounds like it's been increased with a THC less than 1%. Of course, as we said before, CBD, cannabidiol is non-psychotropic, does not induce a high. Now, something that I do want to emphasize, and this is sort of my point to be up here and speak. A lot of my colleagues, a lot of legislators that I've spoken to, one of the main issues they keep asking me about is the FDA issues. I think it's very important to re-emphasize that many of the FDA-approved drugs have significant side effects, but they believe that the benefit outweighed the side effects. I can tell you firsthand, I've experienced just about all of these with my daughter. Drowsiness, lethargy, irritability, depression, weight changes, headache, dizziness, difficulty walking, nausea, vomiting. And these are the common side effects you deal with every day. Now let's talk about the life-threatening ones. Fulminant liver failure. Comes on fast and hard. You can't change it. You watch them die. Aplastic anemia, which is basically irreversible destruction of the bone marrow. Also a very high mortality rate. And Stevens-Johnson syndrome. On several of the medications, one of the families shared with me that their neurologist said, don't go look this up or you won't want to give this to your daughter. This is a disorder in which basically your body overreacts and sloughs off the skin, like third-degree burns. Also a very high mortality rate. The longer you are on these medications and the higher the doses you're on, the higher the risk of developing these severe life-threatening causes. Obviously, I think this is sort of a smoking gun. In 2003, the NIH for the United States received a patent for cannabinoids and antioxidants and neuroprotectants. Specifically, if you dig into that more, epilepsy treatment was one of the things that was listed. AMA actually supports this, has supported this for years. It dates back to 1997. It was reaffirmed in 2013. You can see that at the base. It's a lot of minutia, but it basically spells out that they want more research in medical use of cannabis. And I think that one of the things with this bill that the Medical Association of Georgia was able to get behind is the fact that it's structured in a way to get more of that research, hard data. So that's why we're supporting it. I thank you. My daughter thanks you.
Okay. Dr. Smith and Dr. Green, I have a question just to clarify for the committee. There is already available and FDA approved a form of this drug ready that if academic institutions apply, they may be able to receive permission to research it, right?
Epidiolex is what you're referring to.
Right, and so that is available. That is what they are testing in New York. And
Yes,
so
ma'am.
that's available. I think there's 7 studies going on across.
New York was the first one. I was aware of 5. I didn't know it was up to 7, but unfortunately, the ones we've contacted, they have pre-selected and they're closed and they're a limited amount.
Right.
So yes, ma'am, there
that is
are
available to use it, and it is FDA approved, whereas Charlotte's Web is not FDA approved, correct?
The FDA has given orphan status to the Epidiolex, which basically means for these studies that we're referring to. So it's not approved for the general population. It has to be through a research study trial.
Right. It's approved for research, and it has had animal testing.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and Charlotte's Web has not.
Has not had
At this point.
Has not had FDA trials approved. No, ma'am.
Okay, and Dr. Green, is it not correct that the Medical Association gave their support if it was done under, clinical, very tight clinical control situations, which would mean meeting those would be something that's FDA approved?
We did not address FDA approval per se. We were aware there may be issues with importing the oil, importing the seeds,
okay.
that had information that was being worked on with the FDA.
but at this time it's not.
Madam Chair, I'm more than happy to make this available to anybody where they research the minutia because it's very long-winded.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Dr. Watson, you had a question. No, pass. Okay, and certainly.
A pleasure to get to know you. Just real quick, two questions. You can answer them real quick. Epidemics, you attempted to get on the trial, and what happened when you attempted to get on the trial?
When we contacted, apparently they had already pre-selected out for Dravet syndrome. My daughter has DEW syndrome, which is another one of the severe refractory syndromes, and they had already filled out that study, so it was closed.
Okay. And second question, Madam Chair, if I can follow up.
Sure.
You are in a position, because of the position with your child who has a seizure disorder, of having to make a decision to either stay here in Georgia and continue to take FDA-approved drugs, or move your family to Colorado to obtain Charlotte's Web.
Yes,
as a physician, as a medical professional, you're having to make a decision of, should I give what has been coined a non-FDA approved drug, not tested on animals. You're having to make that decision of whether to give that to your own daughter. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you have made what decision regarding that?
Well, I think, as you can see from my presentation, I've spent several months reading anything and everything that's out there. And I relate this back to a mentor that I had that once said, if you treat every patient as how you'd want to treat your loved one, you'll always stay true to your oath. And I feel, when I look at the big picture of this, it falls within that realm, and that I would still be honoring the do no harm. So, yes, I would give it to my daughter without reservation.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, Dr. Smith, thank you very much. I appreciate you being here. Hopefully we can get some approved studies that meet the requirements that our academic institutions would have to have, and maybe that will be a help for you.
Yes, ma'am.
As a pediatric nurse who taught pediatric nursing, I certainly understand the problems with this in treating this illness. Okay, Dr. Fellini? Oh, I'm sorry. Unipies, okay. All right, do you have a question?
I want to ask about the dosage real quick, if I could. Dr. Smith?
Dr. Smith, you need to be.
I'm sorry?
Thank you, Dr. Smith.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to ask you real quick, there was a quote that was given on 50% seizure reduction.
And there's a 1978 study that was followed up in 1980 where they gave cannabidiol to, it was a double-blinded placebo-controlled study initially done in Germany and then repeated, and it showed a 50% reduction in seizure. Oh, actually, that study showed 50% became seizure-free.
Okay. Does that mean that the 202 children that are currently in Colorado would be the ones that are seizure-free, and that's why they're staying?
I'm not sure I understand the question. I apologize.
If it didn't work with everyone, they wouldn't stay in Colorado.
Right.
True.
So only the ones in Colorado naturally would stay because it's working for them.
I think that's a fair assumption, I guess. Yes, sir.
Do we know how many went to Colorado and decided not to?
Not to stay because it wasn't working? No, sir, I don't have those numbers.
And finally, with your own, and I don't know how to ask this, with your own child or someone else's, do you give this out by the gram? How do you decide if they need 1 gram, 2 gram, if they need it 3 times a day, once a day? Who makes that decision, and how is that done?
Currently, I'm not clear on any specific dosing. I mean, I know even with the drugs that my daughter's taking right now, you usually start with a certain low dose and you titrate up until you see improvement. And that's balancing the side effects of the drug. So because it's an oral form, you can give a certain amount of drops and you can increase those until you see a certain response or no response.
Madam Chair, if you'll allow me to continue, I apologize for not having a medical background.
Okay.
How much time, if you give them, you say you start with the low dose. I'm deferring to the physicians. If you started with 1 dose, how much time do you give them before you say, this isn't working, let's give them 2 doses? And who makes that decision? And is that decision, is that consistent? 1 dose doesn't work for 2 weeks. Is that an 80% consistency with all children or all cases? How do you make that determination?
I think in general what you'll find is in the world of irretractable seizures, there are no set guidelines for anything. Unfortunately, it doesn't follow an algorithm of you give this and you'll get this response. You know, some of the testimony that you'll hear, some of the things that's in the literature, some people gave one dose and immediately saw results. We heard that earlier. Some people had to give more doses over a period of time. I know the first medication that my daughter started on was Keppra, and we saw no improvement for close to 2 weeks until, you know, after multiple phone calls, they said, okay, let's go up on the dose. And then it was adding ethosuximide, and then it was adding valproic acid, and then et cetera, through the whole realm. And
my final question would be, what's the maximum number of doses that you've seen given, or that could be presented in testimony from his lab that's been given to one child?
That, sir, I don't have the information for. I'm happy to defer that to anybody that has the floor.
And
Mr. I just want to say something real quick. There's only a couple of us here from Colorado. That's Paige Figge and myself. We'll stay after if you have some of these questions you'd like to go over.
I just would like to know what's the maximum number of doses.
Yes, sir, and I apologize for not being able to answer that.
And Mr. Stanley, if I need to address a question to you, I will be glad to do that, and I will address you, and you can come up and speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. And if you have a specific thing on the maximum doses, you can come forward and tell us now. And I do have another question. And the doctors that are named out there, are they pediatric neurologists?
Some of them are. One of the doctors that Paige mentioned is an adult epileptologist.
Adult?
Yes.
Okay.
As far as dosing goes, we've started this under the same type of titration, starting slow, moving up, that you would do with any pharmaceutical, with very bright parents and their neurologist, like Paige Figge here, tracking even blood levels of the different anti-epileptic drugs as they titrate in cannabidiol. We've found a average dosing of, say, between 3 and 4 milligrams per pound body weight, though some of it can go up to 5 or 6 milligrams CBD per pound body weight.
Per day or multiple times a day?
Per day, taken 3 times daily, split over 3 doses.
Thank you. And you were referring to an adult person, not a pediatric neurologist.
No, in fact, we encourage these parents, and they do, to work with their pediatric neurologist, and they all do.
Out of state?
No, these are all families that are in state. The ones that are out of state can't.
Is an in-state pediatric neurologist an in-state Colorado pediatric neurologist? Or you?
Oh, there are many of them at this point that are tracking these results because these are their patients.
But they're not involved. Are they there in Colorado, these pediatric neurologists? That
yes.
They are dealing with the patients there?
Yes.
Thank you. Representative Jaspers.
Thank you, Doctor. Right here in the middle.
Yes, sir.
Just a question I have on, you're talking about the 7 studies with Epidiolex that's coming from France?
It's London-based GW
London-based. My curiosity, is that drug labeled for use in London, England, European Union, for similar treatments?
I think they're currently conducting trials.
So it's not labeled for use in this world at the current moment?
Not my understanding, no.
Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Fellini?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm Dr. Robert Fulminant. I'm a child neurologist with specialized in pediatric epilepsy. I have been in Atlanta since 1995, and during that time, I was the medical director of the Children's Epilepsy Center for 15 years. For the last 2 years, I have been in private practice at Panda Neurology in Atlanta. And throughout this time and until today, I have participated in many clinical research trials, both in epilepsy and in other pediatric neurological disorders. The parent of one of our patients with Dravet syndrome sparked my interest in CBD, cannabidiol. She, as well as other parents that are actively involved in this bill, have been looking for other options as their children continue to have many seizures and medication side effects. Fueled by media coverage on the use of medical marijuana, I pursued additional research, and today I believe there's potential for CBD to be used in the management of refractory epilepsy in children. However, there are several questions that need to be addressed. We do not have specific guidelines for appropriate dosing, and we don't have enough data for safety and side effects. And there are concerns regarding quality control that need to be clearly understood. CBD is one of the many cannabinoids, and the purity of the product for the use of children need to be strictly regulated and of utmost importance. We do not know the effect on the developing brain, and some of the cannabinoids may have proconvulsant properties. And we need, therefore, clear and strict standardization and regulation. The parents of the children with poorly controlled seizures, including those diagnosed with Dravet and Lennox-Gastaut, face major challenges daily. They continue to have frequent seizures, and the medical, emotional, and developmental problems that come along make this a complicated journey for both the children and their family. It is our responsibility to offer them the best treatment options available and to allow hope for novel therapies. These, however, need to be clearly, carefully instituted, guided by medical personnel that is properly trained, and under controlled circumstances to assure the proper administration of medicinal products. I want to call your attention to one of the parts of the bill and the wording that limits the use of CBD to academic research institutions. It excludes private practice physicians to participate in this important effort, and many of the families that are sitting behind me are actually patients of mine that I have followed for a long period of time. Although we need to be cautious and very tightly regulated, I believe that some of us can also conduct the trials outside of the institutions. To further strengthen this point, the Food and Drug Administration from the Department of Health and Human Services just granted me approval for an expanded IND, or new drug application, using CBD in children with intractable epilepsy. It requires still approval by the IRB and the DEA, and once that's completed, I plan to proceed with this protocol using CBD in my private practice on a very small number of patients, though. And it'll be done in conjunction with several other epilepsy centers in the country, what others have referred here as the GW trial, or the one that is actually happening as well in New York. We are going to be using 95 to 99% pure CBD under a strict protocol that is going to look at dosing, efficacy, and side effects. And it is likely that a placebo-controlled trial will follow, but details on that are not available today. As you see, my efforts should also allow me to continue the search for treatment outside of academic institutions. And I want to congratulate Mr. Peek and the other members that put Bill 885 together as we continue our effort in finding new treatment options for patients with poorly controlled seizures. Thank you for your attention.
Dr. Fulminant, did I understand that you're going to conduct research on a drug that we may not be able to get legally into the state of Georgia?
What I'm saying is that I have applied for an expanded IND, which is a new drug application. It's a physician-sponsored IND, and it'll be using CBD under the protocol. It's the same protocol that is being used in New York.
Okay, but using one of the CBDs that have been FDA approved?
It's actually the same one that has been referred before as having orphan drug status.
Right, which
it's
is
pure
FDA
cannabidiol.
approved.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Representative Peek. No, you pass, okay. Representative Pack.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I apologize for coming in late. I was at another committee hearing. Dr. Bellini, quick question about the DEA. It's my understanding the state of Georgia has 4 licensed DEA approved, I guess, institutions here who they're allowed to handle Schedule I substances, which includes marijuana. Are you affiliated with one of those institutions?
No, I'm not affiliated with I'm not sure that I understand your question. Am I affiliated with a DEA?
No.
Right. Do you have, or did you apply for a permit to handle Schedule I?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. And that is, I mean, that is a very detailed procedure to get that approval?
It is very detailed and very lengthy.
So if they approved you...
And it's just starting.
Right, but if you get that approval, you will have gone through a lot of clearance, correct?
That is correct,
If
because
we-
the approval for the IND just came to me last Friday, so it just came.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We are at Representative Peak. We are now past an hour, but we have families that want to speak. I would ask them to, I'm going to go past, but it means the committee, we're going to be here a little past 5. Does anybody know if it's snowing outside yet? Good, so you can probably still get home safe and sound. That's my concern. All right, so if the families, Aaron Keplinger, if you will keep your testimony very, very short. Just tell us, basically, we understand that and appreciate you coming. You've been in my office. I certainly, understand and have great empathy for your problem. And
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. First of all, I wanted to address, there was a question earlier about children seeing a neurologist in Colorado that are that have this treatment for their child. When a few months back we called to try to get an appointment for our child, and they told us that the calendar was completely full and that we would have to call back when there was a new calendar made for all the neurologists at the largest institution in Colorado. So the patients that are being seen on this medicine are being followed by pediatric neurologists within Colorado. I just wanted to make that point clear. My son, Hunter Kleppinger, has been tortured with seizures for 8 years. He hasn't been living, he's just been existing until now. Since we left Georgia, we started Hunter on non-psychoactive cannabis oil taken by mouth. It's not getting him high, it's just getting him well. At 4 months, he started to arch himself forward with his arms and legs and head. We found out later our child had infantile spasms, an extremely untreatable and life-threatening form of epilepsy. The doctors told us if Hunter survives infancy, there's a very good chance he won't live to adulthood. We've failed over a dozen drugs. He was on the ketogenic diet for over 2 years. He had a VNS seizure interrupter implanted under his skin, and we tried chiropractic. The medicines gave Hunter increased seizures, screaming 24 hours a day, sleeping 24 hours a day, awake 24 hours a day, horrible withdrawals with hours straight of screaming, and extreme constipation. The ketogenic diet unfortunately put us in the hospital for a 2-day ICU stay that nearly killed our son. And those were just the side effects we observed. Nothing worked. We would try anything we knew of to stop the seizures, but nothing worked. We had no options left. We heard about Charlotte Figge and her story, and she reminded us of our own child. Charlotte was described as catatonic, can't walk, can't talk, can't eat. These words describe my son, my baby. We left our support system in Marietta to go to Colorado. My wife and I lived in Georgia for 58 years. Our entire family lives here. My in-laws live on our street. My father-in-law packed our entire house to move us from Georgia to Colorado. Then he flew to Colorado to unpack the truck. That is the kind of support system that we left. We were forced to choose our child over our home. I believe our son's doctor supports our choice to try Charlotte's Web, or he wouldn't be speaking to this committee today. Hunter is on no other medicine. The results from Charlotte's Web have been shocking. The first dose, we saw massive improvements in his relaxation, happiness, awareness, and most importantly, his seizures. Prior to Charlotte's Web, Hunter clenched his fists so tightly 24 hours a day, except for when he was sleeping, that he would cut his hands and they would bleed 24 hours a day. The very first dose of Charlotte's Web, he has never done this again. We've seen huge improvements in constipation issues so many epileptic children suffer from. He was having seizures 83% of his days, and on last count, his seizures are down to 42% of his days on nothing but Charlotte's Web. And that's in 2 months on a low dose. Before starting this medicine, his seizures were typically 2 to 5 minutes. Now his seizures are 0 to 2 minutes, and many of them are under 15 seconds. Since starting Charlotte's Web, Hunter holds his arms out like he's going to seize, and he just puts his arms down. No seizure noted. Charlotte's Web has exponentially improved Hunter's quality of life. His seizures are decreasing and seem to be going away. We were told by doctors in the past that until the seizures cease, Hunter has no chance to live or develop. With Charlotte's Web medicine, we feel like he's starting to live. Please allow Georgians to have this treatment option. Please allow us to come home.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Chris Clark, we can please keep it to about 3 minutes, Mr. Clark.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee for allowing me to speak. My name is Sergeant Chris Clark. I'm a 26-year veteran of the Atlanta Police Department, currently assigned as the supervising drug custodian of the narcotic evidence for the city of Atlanta. These are my two boys, Jackson and Caden. They are both currently located in Colorado Springs along with my wife, Kimberly. Caden, the one on the left with the fashionable sock monkey knit cap, has Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, a severe form of epilepsy since his birth. He is now 10 years of age. He's currently waiting for the cannabis oil that's in Colorado. He is one of the children that are on the waiting list. While we were here, we have received the gold standard of medical care for our son, Caden, by who I believe is one of the greatest neurological minds in this country, speaking of Dr. Fulminant. Caden has gone through 24 medications, which, by the way, some of them not being FDA approved, 2 extreme diets that mimic starvation, and 2 brain surgery procedures in an attempt to control his epilepsy. As a result of the brain surgery, he suffered a post-operative stroke that was yet another medical issue that we had to confront. None of the current known epilepsy treatments have been successful for Caden. Most of the medications that we have given him have had severe side effects and are doing damage to the rest of his body and his internal organs. Kim and I knew that we were running out of time with Caden when we were at a loss as to what we could do for him. We were living out the days giving him the best life that he could have and the most experiences we could give him before that one seizure that we knew would take him from us. We have lived our lives the last 10 years not knowing if Caden would survive another day. I've watched his brother Jackson cautiously approach Caden to see if he was still breathing as he slept. That, ladies and gentlemen, will bring the toughest man down to the ground. My wife and I have spent countless hours doing the same thing as Jackson, making sure our son was still alive and breathing. Then last summer, my wife showed me the video of Paige's daughter, Charlotte Figge. As a law enforcement officer, my first reaction was, no, I'm not giving my son marijuana. I've been on the front line fighting against narcotics, marijuana, and other narcotics in some capacity, to include being an undercover narcotics detective for a few years of my career. The strong, persistent wife I have stayed on me and pressed me to look at this treatment and do my own investigation. I did my investigation, and what I discovered was that this is not marijuana that I've been fighting against my entire career. At one point in my career, while assigned to narcotics, I was a certified marijuana examiner through the state of Georgia, which gave me an additional knowledge to look at this product. In simple terminology, this is a cannabis oil derived from the marijuana plant, but it had little THC and no psychoactive properties to it. In other words, you can't get high. After researching Charlotte's case and numerous other children that were being saved by this oil, by the way, with no side effects, I looked at my wife and said, we have to do this to try to keep Caden from dying. Since this product was not legal in Georgia, Kimberly and I discussed logistics and made the decision that she and the boys would move to Colorado and I would remain here in Georgia to provide an income and medical insurance to help support what we were about to do. As a police officer, and more importantly as a father, not being around to protect your family is a helpless feeling. But on December 12, 2012, I loaded a truck and moved my family 1,500 miles across the country. The cannabis oil we are speaking about today has no use for individual that uses marijuana. It has no value. Simply put, you cannot get high. Individuals that want to use marijuana will go after street-level marijuana that is high in THC, and that will produce the psychoactive effect they are looking for. Once again, this is not cannabis oil. And unlike OxyContin or Vicodin, to name a couple of prescription medications that are highly abused, cannabis oil that would also be regulated by a physician would have no value to an addict. I joined the police department to make a difference, to change things, to help people. I know that I have not been able to help or save everyone that I have come in contact with over the years. But I know in my 26 years in law enforcement, I have saved some and changed lives for both adults and children in this state. But nothing has given me greater joy than to save a child. As a member of Georgia politics, you wanted to change things and make a difference in this state. You have a choice and a chance to make a difference and save our Georgia children that are suffering and dying by granting them access to cannabis oil here in this great state. I plead with you to do the right thing and approve cannabis oil for our children. They don't have any more time. We are out of time.
Thank you. Can you tell me wait just a minute. I've heard several people say you were taking drugs that were not FDA approved. Just give me an example of what you were taking that was not FDA approved, and where did you get it?
Well, back when Caden first started 10 years ago was Vigabatrin. And it was gotten here. I mean, it was given to us. It was prescribed, but it was not FDA approved.
Okay. Prescribed by a physician?
Yes.
Yeah, I guess he was putting his medical license in danger then.
Well,
apparently.
I don't know.
So,
I'm just telling you that it wasn't approved.
Okay, he told you that it wasn't approved?
That's correct.
I wonder if it perhaps wasn't.
In fact, if I recall, we had to, I'll take that back, we had to order it from Canada.
Okay, thank you. That's probably how it was coming into the country. Thank you. Representative Watson.
Yeah, just point of clarification. I mean, there are many drugs that are non-FDA approved, like Inderal, a beta blocker was for migraines, used for high blood pressure, and the drugs like Exelon used in geriatrics and Alzheimer's was approved elsewhere and then shipped in here, not illegally, but were approved elsewhere, and then can be used here and prescribed. What's called off-label is not an uncommon practice in the practice of medicine here. Every physician in the room, I would assume, has prescribed medicines off-label, and it's not an uncommon practice.
Are we talking about off-label, Dr. Watson, when it wasn't prescribed for the illness that somebody is using it for?
Right. The example that I used that's a common one was Inderal, propanolol, used in high blood pressure and heart disease, works for migraines. Eventually did get approved. The drug, the Alzheimer's medicine used overseas, non-FDA approved, but did eventually get FDA approved here, which presumably is what we're looking at here.
So, okay. Mr. Nichols, see if you can do a little better on the time, please.
I'll try my best. Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you very much for allowing us to speak. I'm Ross Nicholas, and I want to tell you a brief story about Faith and my son, Henry. It begins, as a young couple, we were expecting our first child and all the hopes and joys and expectations of that. Henry was born in November 2007. He had his first seizure in February. It was a life-threatening state of persistent seizure that lasted for hours. We live on a busy street, and it was a Saturday morning. I remember it clearly, and I remember him carrying him in my arms as the paramedics stopped traffic both ways, about 5 cars deep, to get us to the hospital. Neighbors and everyone else watching. For the next 3 years, we were in and out of emergency rooms and pediatric intensive care units fighting for his life. The ER and the transport teams, they knew us by name. We still send them Christmas cards to this day. We've tried 8 different anti-seizure medications, not to mention the ones that are given to them in the hospital and the drugs that we use to treat the side effects of the other drugs. Seizures, they're messy, they're unpredictable. The first time we had the courage to send out a birthday invitation, Henry had a cluster of seizures and stayed upstairs in his mother's arms, so I had to come downstairs and tell the kids and the parents that the party was over. During a routine test, Henry had a code blue and we almost lost him. But thankfully, Dr. Fulminant was the attending physician during that time. Multiple times, there's been a hospital chaplain that's been called into a trauma room, and we've cried in their arms, preparing for the worst, but praying that Henry would stay with us for just a little while longer. The current treatment options that we have, as you heard today, they're imperfect. We've given a 3-year-old pentobarbital to stop his seizures, and we all know what pentobarbital is used for. to the point, you know, some of the medications that Henry is on are not FDA approved. They has been approved by the EMA, one of the drugs, Therapental, and so it gets orphan status. For his emergency medication, it's midazolam, Versed, which is off-label, as Representative Watson had pointed out, not to be used for children. So the side effects we all know, they make them high, hallucinate, cause depression. You know, Dravet syndrome is the same disease that Charlotte has, and it's an incurable drug-resistant epilepsy. So basically, we're going to try each treatment until it's no longer effective, and then we'll try another one. So with that, you know, there are these medical imperfections, there are these physical imperfections, but I do know that Henry's made in God's image, and I do know that he's more than a poor prognosis. And so I do urge you to grant us this opportunity to allow for a regulated, doctor-managed access to medical cannabis. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, and thank you for being a bit shorter. We're losing, I feel like we have about 9 other people to speak, and we will start losing. We've lost one member. I don't think that's fair. So that is why I am asking families, I'm sorry to have to ask you to be succinct. Shannon Cloud. Huh? I'm sorry. Did you have a question? Pardon? What? Pardon? Okay. No, I think I have 2 people, please. 2 left. And if you can keep it to 2 minutes, and I'm going to time you.
Yes, ma'am.
Because I think the story's probably the same, pretty much.
It's it's a little bit different. My name is Jonathan Giles, and my son has Ohtahara syndrome. He is 4 months old. Or actually, he is not even 4 months. He'll be 4 months and 6 days. And I will keep, if he's in the PICU right now at Scottish Rite. He spent 2/3 of his life there. So far, you know, like I said, 3 months old, he's already been on 6 medications. He's failed 1. He's not even eligible for a lot of this other stuff. And, you know, right now what he's on is Klonopin, phenobarbital, Topamax, Keppra, L-carnitine. These drugs, their side effects, drowsiness, vomiting, diarrhea, headaches, slurred speech, drooling, dry mouth, loss of appetite, increased seizures, hallucination, and death.
Well, I don't think are we having a 4-month-old show all those to lighten it a little bit?
I'm listing the side effects.
Okay, but he's not showing those.
The side effects that he personally shows is vomiting, diarrhea, drowsiness, general slow development. That's what he's showing.
Right.
So, you know, as of right now, we don't know. He could be hallucinating. We don't know. But all of these FDA-approved drugs, and that's what he's been dealing with. And so that's my story.
Well, I mean, to have a brand new baby go through this is terrible, and I was only trying to lighten you just a little bit when I said he wasn't doing the others, wasn't trying to be mean, because as a new parent, I'm sure this is terrible.
Right, and he has about 10 to 25 tonic seizures a day, and that's what I watch pretty much every day.
Are the doctors at the hospital suggesting that you use something like this?
The doctors at the hospital that we've been going through, you know, we're at the beginning of what they're discussing. We're right now, you know, of course, because of the fact that he is only 3 months old, we still have drugs left that he has not failed, but statistically likely will fail.
Okay.
So we just have to keep going through until he does fail.
Now, I know everybody in this committee wishes all the families with these children the best. Thank you for coming. Okay. Are you Shannon Cloud?
I'm Janae.
Okay. Ms. Cox.
Thank you for having us. I'm Janae Cox. My daughter is Haley Cox. She's 4 years old. On January 10th of this year, I held my dying child in my arms. She turned blue. She was not breathing. I had to administer rescue breaths and CPR, and she was rushed to the hospital. She has now been in the PICU for almost 50 days. She continues to quit breathing. We are on our 56th episode today. As I was here, my husband texted me to tell me that she had quit breathing. I am going to lose my child if this drug does not get approved. I can't lose my child. I watch her have 100+ seizures a day. And I have had 4 pediatric neurologists give up on my child. And then we found Dr. Fulminant. You guys know his opinion on this medicine, so I don't have to tell you. We are right now in the process of moving to Colorado. We are going to break up our family. My husband's going to stay here. I've had pediatric ICU doctors ask me how I do this every day and watch my child die like she's doing right now. And I watch it every day. My husband will stay here while I try to keep my child alive in Colorado. My child is Charlotte Figge. So I just ask that you please open your hearts. I know it's not FDA approved, but we don't have time. I don't have time. I can't lose my daughter. She doesn't deserve to die because we can't get a medicine here that she could get in Colorado. So I just ask that you open your hearts. I can't watch her continue to quit breathing. I can't. No mother could. So please, please open your hearts for Haley Cox and for all of the other families that are behind me. No doctor can give me a time span on what my child will live. I always check to make sure she's still alive during the night. I never sleep because that one seizure could be her last one. So that's why I ask, please, please open your hearts. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there one more person that thought they were going to speak? Is that, you sure? That's it. Okay. Pardon? Yes.
Before we continue, to the members of the committee that were not here when I first started, I hope you've seen a little bit of what I've seen over the last 5 or 6 weeks. And I continue to ask you just to have an open mind about this issue. This is, at the end of the day, a human story. We're talking about lives of Georgians who are having to uproot themselves and their families to move to Colorado because they don't have the benefit of this particular option for them. This is what we're talking about, folks. This is what we're talking about legalizing in this bill. Not smoking it, not bringing it in a grassy seed form. It's this right here. And so I continue to ask the question that I asked the few members of the committee that were here. What would you do if this was your child? How would that change your posture on your position on this bill if it was your child that was suffering from these seizure disorders, or if it was your family that was facing these tough decisions? Dan, I appreciate your continued indulgence and listen to that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, and I would like to thank all the families that have come. I can tell you, as I said, I was a pediatric nurse and taught pediatric nursing. However, I have not experienced what you're going through personally myself. However, a niece that spent all her summers in college with us, and we helped raise when she was even smaller than that, has a child that experiences seizures. And I, wore a helmet for the first about 3 years of her life. And so I want to thank you for coming to explain this to us. It's hard to even imagine what you're going through, and I really appreciate you coming and telling your stories. And I'm sure I probably speak for every single member of this committee that we appreciate you being here. So thank you very much. And with that, I will call the first person on the next list. Sue Rushi. And if you will identify yourself and tell us who you're with.
I'm bringing
Yes.
with me my chair of my board, William Carter.
Okay.
Who would like to sit with me.
And if you will identify the board. And
our organization is National Families in Action. We have been in business since 1977. I'll tell you a little bit more about that. And Bill Carter is the chairman of the board, and I'm president and CEO of the organization. We thought we might begin today by showing committee members where it is that parents buy Charlotte's Oil, along with the full range of marijuana medicines sold by the Stanley Brothers at their medical marijuana store called Indispensary in Colorado Springs.
Welcome to the End Dispensary, located at 123 East Bijou in downtown Colorado Springs.
Can you put the mic closer? Okay.
The End Dispensary is conveniently located across from Acacia Park in the Independent Record Store. The End Dispensary is open daily, 7 days a week, from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m., with last call at 6:45. The End Dispensary offers a safe and unique environment for patients, members, and non-members alike. The End Dispensary prides itself on one of the largest selections of medical marijuana in the city. The End Dispensary also offers a full line of vaporizers and edibles. With prices starting at only $25 an eighth, the End Dispensary provides an affordable and effective way of pain relief. The End Dispensary has a full line of indicas, sativas, and hybrids for every need. The End Dispensary prides itself on offering one of the largest selections of medical marijuana in Colorado Springs. The End Dispensary also offers a full line of strain-specific keef and hash.
It's repeating itself.
Check out just a few of the End Dispensary's high-quality strains.
Yeah. Is it? It's not very long. Is it about pretty much over?
Just a minute.
Okay. Okay.
For the largest selection and the best prices, visit the End Dispensary today in downtown Colorado Springs at 123 East Bijou.
So my name is Sue Rushi, and I am President and CEO of National Families in Action, founded here in Atlanta in 1977, and Bill Carter is the chairman of our board. We are a drug prevention and policy organization that educates the public about the harmful effects of addictive drugs, particularly to children. Among our many projects over the years is the Addiction Studies Program for the states, which we co-founded with Wake Forest University School of Medicine in 2005. Funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse, the program conducts workshops for state legislators and executive branch department administrators to help them improve their drug policies based on scientific evidence. And I'm happy to say that a team from Georgia attended one of our workshops about 2 years ago. Our organization supports families with children who suffer from Dravet syndrome and other rare forms of epilepsy. Our hearts go out to every one of them. We applaud Representative Peake for centering his bill in research to help these families. This is completely different from the open-ended market in 20 states that allow the sale of drugs which the Food and Drug Administration has not approved as safe or effective, and that doctors cannot therefore prescribe. Even though there are 20 states with so-called marijuana medicines, doctors cannot prescribe a single one, only recommend them. It is hard for people to understand that a drug like marijuana, which is so harmful to children and others, has components that may be useful medicines. Marijuana contains some 60 to 70 chemicals called cannabinoids. They are unique to the marijuana plant. Some of these are showing promise in research as potential medicines, and one is cannabidiol, called CBD. There actually is a CBD oil being given to children with severe epileptic seizures in 7 preliminary trials that the Food and Drug Administration recently approved. More trials are expected to be approved soon, including one in Georgia, and I think we heard today which one that is, which doctor has gotten that trial. That CBD oil is called Epidiolex, developed by GW Pharmaceuticals of Great Britain. In 1998, the British government gave GW permission to grow pure marijuana and extract cannabinoids from it, to purify those cannabinoids to ensure that they don't contain pesticides, mold, mildew, pathogens, and other contaminants that can make sick people even sicker, and to test those cannabinoids in preclinical research, meaning testing in animals, to make sure they're safe to administer to human research subjects. GW tested Epidiolex in preclinical research for 5 years. The drug's purity, its preclinical research results, and GW's manufacturing protocols qualifies Epidiolex to be administered to humans in current FDA trials. Realm oil, on the other hand, made from Charlotte's Web marijuana, often called Charlotte's oil, satisfies none of these criteria. Its makers do not grow pure marijuana according to standards set by the National Institute on Drug Abuse for research. They have not purified Realm oil, which they extract from Charlotte's Web marijuana, to FDA specifications. Therefore, they cannot guarantee parents that Charlotte's oil is free of pesticides, mold, mildew, pathogens, or other contaminants that can make sick children even sicker. They have not tested Charlotte's oil in animals in preclinical research to make sure it is safe to give to humans participating in FDA clinical trials. In fact, after claiming on its website that Charlotte's oil will provide a better quality of life for people with cancer, MS, HIV/AIDS, epilepsy, Parkinson's, and many other debilitating conditions, the Realm of Caring Foundation posts the following disclaimers, and I quote, "These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These products and statements are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Any and all Realm of Caring representatives are not doctors in any way or claim to be." National Families in Action believes that children with rare forms of epilepsy have the right to an experimental drug that is pure, that is free of contaminants that can hurt them, and that is safe for them to take in FDA clinical trials. We hope Representative Peake will amend his bill to bring it into compliance with the Food and Drug Administration and its regulations that protect research subjects from being given impure, unsafe experimental drugs. We hope the makers of Charlotte's oil will test their product according to FDA regulations and standards before selling it to desperate parents of very sick children. And we hope the Georgia legislature will pass a bill to expand current FDA preliminary trials that are testing Epidiolex to ascertain whether it can help children with severe seizures, so that one day, not only children in Georgia who participate in these trials, but all children with severe forms of epilepsy can be helped. As part of my testimony, I have attached more information. Do you have our testimony? Has that been given to you yet?
Have you given out the form?
That needs to get passed out, so you have it. As part of my testimony, I have attached more information about the difference between Charlotte's oil and Epidiolex, as well as other CBD oils that may be available from the National Institute on Drug Abuse and possibly other sources which do meet FDA specifications for administering to human subjects in clinical trials. I would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Representative Pruitt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got 3 quick questions. One, here I am right here, I'm sorry.
you.
I didn't put my name tag out. Are you insinuating that this cannabis oil is habit forming?
No.
Okay. But you mentioned that was a fear.
No, I didn't. No, our fear is that Charlotte's oil has not been purified, and it's not been tested in animals,
Yes, ma'am.
which are two critical points that FDA requires before an experimental drug can be given to human
I think that was
subjects.
the second part of your testimony, but in the very beginning, I thought you were saying that you were talking about children and the ability to possibly be addicted to different type drugs, and I thought you were insinuating
We're
that
talking
you
about
were-
marijuana,
Oh.
not about CBD.
Okay, very good. So that's a totally different subject. The other thing is, I agree with you. I think it should be purified and tested, but not necessarily have to wait on the FDA approval. It takes a long, long time. And
It
I hope-
actually would take, if I may, I'm sorry.
Sure, go ahead.
The people who are part of GW Pharmaceuticals would be delighted to see a statewide IND put together in Georgia to expand to more children who suffer these problems, to get them into tests, FDA-approved tests, and get them be given the oil and continue to test whether or not it's effective. It takes 30 days. Any doctor in Georgia right now could apply, as Dr. Fellini did, to become one of the physicians who provides Epidiolex to up to 25 children and possibly more. And FDA has to turn that around in 30 days.
Okay, well, your last statement was talking about that. You said it may be available. You didn't say that it was available.
No, may be available from the National Institute on Drug Abuse, a second source. Epidiolex would be available under the circumstances I just described.
Within 30 days.
Within 30 days.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Okay, and remember, once again, let's try to keep them short. Representative Pack.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Quick question. I know you support the use of CBD for research purposes, but it's my understanding that CBD might have some other therapeutic uses, and I'm kind of wondering why, as a policymaker, we would have to just limit the research to the children versus opening it up for any other Georgians who may benefit from use of CBD for therapeutic uses.
Well, with all due respect, and I love policymakers, but policymakers are not researchers. And so I think that if researchers want to try CBD oil or any other cannabinoid in marijuana, in fact, they're doing that. That's going on all over the country as we speak.
So would you support use of CBD oil research, like in research?
We do.
Not just the children, but as long as it's in purified form, is that what
As
you're
long
saying?
as researchers who have evidence preliminarily from animal research that there is a good possibility that CBD might help someone with something else, yes, of course we would support that. We support research.
Representative Kaiser.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I just wanted to get clarification on two things. I think there were two things presented thus far that have been presented in a negative light. One is the dispensary. Would you talk a little bit about that, the clip that we saw?
Mm-hmm. The clip you saw is of In Dispensary, which is a promotional video that we took from YouTube that is owned by the Stanley Brothers, and that's where parents go to purchase their Charlotte's Oil. The Colorado Springs Gazette has a video that they took of the Realm of Caring Foundation, and towards the end of the Realm of Caring Foundation, they said, the Stanley Brothers said, and we package up all of the Charlotte's Oil and take it down to In Dispensary so parents can buy it.
So is that problematic? I'm asking a legitimate question. Is it the location? What's problematic about the In Dispensary?
It is a medical marijuana shop that is selling all kinds of marijuana and edibles.
But that's not what we're
lollipops.
asking to do in Georgia. So, okay, I'll move on. My
point is that I want you to understand that's not an approved drug. It's not sold in a pharmacy. It can't be prescribed by doctors. Nothing can that is being sold at In Dispensary or any other medical marijuana shop in Colorado.
Okay, again, that's not what we're trying to do here in Georgia.
I understand that.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I was clear about that. I understand where you're coming from. The other is the disclaimer. I, as a parent, appreciate that disclaimer. So is the disclaimer problematic?
I think that I think you have to take the disclaimers for what they are. What parents are doing when they give Charlotte's Oil to their children is that they are taking risks that they are giving them an unpure drug that may have contaminants in it that may make their children sicker. But what is so important to me is for you to understand that there is a drug that's gone through all that purity test and through all those animal tests for a period of 5 years. And the FDA is now saying to GW Pharmaceutical, this drug shows promise. We want to go the next step in research.
Okay. I would just, Madam Chairman, if I could, just as a co-sponsor of the bill, if it were my child, I would really be very upset. I've taken Topamax before. I wouldn't give it to my child. And so I would, I just don't quite get the testimony, I guess. I would appreciate the disclaimer as a parent. I think we're talking about a lot worse things that these parents are going through than.
There's no question, and do not hear me say that that none of us doesn't sympathize with what these parents are going through. But what our hope is that they will get a hold of CBD oil made by Epidiolex, made by GW Pharmaceuticals, called Epidiolex, and give that to their children in FDA clinical trials, such as the one that Dr. Fulminant has already started.
Representative Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I'm over here. Thank you.
It's a little bit hard.
For you personally, you have a child has tried 10 or 12 different medicines, still having dozens of seizures a day, is on 2 or 3 different medicines. Are you, and GW has turned you down as they turned Dr. Smith down. Are you telling me you wouldn't give this to your child?
I would work very hard to ask my physician to apply to FDA for an investigational new drug application, making it possible for me to give my child GW's product, Epidiolex.
Right. I got that, but so not available? GW not available?
Any physician in the state of Georgia can apply for one of these trials.
Okay, gotcha. The difference in Food and Drug Administration medicines versus food supplements?
I don't think you want to get me started on that. The dietary supplement industry set FDA law on its head, and so for a century we had the protection of nobody being allowed to sell a medicine and market it to people in the United States without first the manufacturer having to get approval and have his drug approved as safe and effective. What the dietary supplement law did, that was passed in the early 90s, was turn that on its head. Now FDA has to prove that a dietary supplement is dangerous before it can be pulled from the market.
So you're saying the law that Congress passed relating to the FDA and allowing vitamins and food supplements is not appropriate for the consumer?
That's my view.
That's your view. I got you. Okay. Does GW contribute to your organization?
They do not.
Thank you.
Okay. Representative Randall?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sitting here perplexed myself. Now, I understand that, that we all agree that sometimes the FDA drags their feet. The process is far longer than it should be, especially in situations like this. But I'm going to ask you the same question that Dr. Watson asked you. You've seen where children have been able to obtain a totally higher level of quality of life by using this drug. No, it's not approved. You're telling me that you wouldn't give your child that drug when you have seen how these children's lives are turned around, how the quality of life has been elevated tremendously, and you would not give your child that drug just because it hasn't been approved?
It's not the issue of approval so much as it is the issue of, is it safe? Has it been tested in animals? Is it pure? Does it not have potential other problems that can make my child sicker? And yes, I would go for Epidiolex.
Okay, further, is Epidiolex readily available? I don't think it is, because I do believe a lot of these parents would have gotten a hold to it if they could.
What people don't understand, because this is also new, Epidiolex was tested for 5 years in animals, and all of the protocols that GW was able to satisfy, et cetera.
Is it readily available?
It is now through investigator-initiated investigational new drugs. So any physician can apply to FDA, excuse me.
That sounds like a process in itself to me. And in the meantime, we've got children like Charlotte who has, it's not approved, but look at her quality of life. When someone has been told that their child, when doctors have given up on these children, do you think they should wait for the process? Or should they do something immediately? Tell me about the meantime.
30 days is the waiting period for a physician to be able to start giving this drug to children. And I think 30 days is a good idea.
I found that really hard to believe.
I've got the information for you. I'll give it to you from the FDA.
But I'm sitting here looking at parents. If 30 days was it, don't you think they would be all over that?
I wish they would. I wish they would.
I believe they would if it was. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Randall, I think if somebody had done, if Dr. Gupta had done a TV thing on the availability of the fact that we could push for more more tests on Epidiolex, that you might find that it would be becoming more available. So hopefully people will push for that. Okay, Representative Peake.
That's true.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Try and be very careful. Is it not true that we've had testimony today already by a parent of a seizure disorder child that he's attempted to get Epidiolex, was told he cannot, that the cost of this Epidiolex is almost $2,000 a month?
No, it's not. It's free.
No.
It's free in the trials that are going on now.
In the trials, that's correct. And it's only for Dravet syndrome. It is not for other seizure disorders.
No, it's for all seizure disorders.
Okay, I think we have testimony out of the fact. Let me also just address the fact that I won't go there. Let me just make sure I understand your logic, and I appreciate the question of Representative Randall and Representative Watson, and I think it goes to the heart of the matter. And let me just make sure I understand your logic. That if you had your way of what you're proposing, that you would tell the parents that have experienced an amazing results by taking Charlotte's Web already, you would tell them, okay, it's maybe time for you to stop taking that and stand in line with lots of other parents who are trying to get Epidiolex. Is that correct? That's the logic that you're proposing today.
It's not.
Is that not true?
It's not what I said.
But isn't that a logic that you would say that because you don't agree that this hadn't been animal tested, even though 50% of the planet has probably used marijuana at some point in time, probably more than 50% of the members of this committee have used marijuana at some time. I would say that's better than animal testing.
Representative Speak, why don't you speak for yourself on the use
well, I can say that I have not, honestly. But I want to go, and that's the truth.
And what I would say back to you is that all of the research that's out there is not all showing positive effects of specific components of marijuana. There is quite a bit of research out there that is showing damage to children's brains, to children's...
Okay, but I just want to, again, go to the heart of the logic. You would tell these families, you would tell Aaron Kleppinger and tell him, you need to stop giving untested, non-FDA approved Charlotte's Web to Hunter, who is, no, let me finish, who is seen amazing. I've watched him unleash his hands. I've held his hand when I was in Colorado 2 weeks ago, saw the results of what is happening through Charlotte's Web. You would tell him that he needs to stop doing that and go fill out a bunch of paperwork to see if you can get on the list for Epidiolex. Is that not true?
No, it's not true.
Representative Pruitt.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Sharp. Wait, Representative. I'm sorry, gone with the wrong person first. Representative Sharper.
Thank you, Chair. I'm over here. But
thank you.
All right, I've been a paramedic for over 23 years, and through my life I've seen a lot of calls, and I'm reminded of a call of a father on Christmas Day. I went over to his home, and we had a child who had a history of seizures. We went several times a week for years to really get to that child. And the night before, she wanted to open one gift before the next morning. And she was kind of denied that. And she had a seizure during the night, and we got there that morning. And I went up and I had a father at the kitchen table. I'm not going to get emotional, okay? I'm going to try not to. But that father was sitting there crying, several hours crying, because he said, you know, if I could have just given her that opportunity, that one gift, to open that one gift. This young lady right now would probably be 22 years old. She was 9 at the time. But I see several seizure patients on a regular basis, and it really kills me when I see the kids. And you were mentioning that you don't know if this is really effective or safe.
No, I didn't say that.
Well, I wrote some
It
things down.
has not been shown to be effective.
Okay, all right. But when we have these people here, regardless if it's safe or unsafe, when we're in reality now, this stuff is working. That baby, the 4-month-old that's in that hospital, 30 days is a long time. For the little Cox little lady, that's a long time. So we got to understand, in the meantime, we got to deal with reality and get something that we know is working. These things are not working. Regardless if you ever test on an animal, we know that it's working on a human. So my thing is, I just encourage everybody to understand we got to do something in Georgia, and I'm a big part of what we're trying to do to save lives and keep those people having to split up.
I totally understand. I totally do, and I understand where you're coming from. Again, the opportunity that you have is to put together a statewide IND with one physician investigating and several other physicians as sub-investigators who can then provide an oil that is pure and an oil that works just as well, it may be better than Charlotte's oil, to children within 30 days. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to make the chair here. We have other questions, but we have other speakers. And before we lose everybody, I'm going on to the other speakers. Thank you, Ms. Rushi. Thank you, sir.
I'm happy to stay for questions later. If you
Right, and I think she will. And we can go back to them with the people that stay. Dr. Tom DeGraw? What?
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members, for inviting us. I have with me David Tatum from Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. We have been discussing this issue for the past several weeks as well, and Children's Healthcare of Atlanta has come up with a statement on this issue. I'm a board-certified pediatric neurologist. I am the Director of Neurosciences at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, and I'm a professor of pediatrics at the Emory School of Medicine. I represent 14 child neurologists who work at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, and we see about 7,000 children with epilepsy. Most of these children are doing very well. When you look at diagnostic testing and management of children that come to us with seizures, with recurrent seizures, we try to find out what the causes of the seizures, and subsequently we start treatment. So we choose a medication that we think is the most effective for that particular type of seizure disorder. If a child fails that medication, we go to a second medication, and then if they fail the second medication, we will often revisit the diagnosis, do more testing, and look for other types of treatments. After children have failed several medications, it becomes quite difficult. We are looking at a very specific diets, the so-called ketogenic diet, very high-fat diet. or we look at possible surgery if there is a seizure focus in the brain that can be surgically removed. After all these procedures, workups, testing, management, there are hundreds of children in our practice alone that cannot be treated for the seizures. The seizures have become intractable. These children end up on multiple medications because it's very difficult for all of us to see what's happening. But there's a very small chance, in fact, that these multiple medications are going to be effective. So, of course, there is a long history of research in the pharmacology of epilepsy. In the last 20 years alone, there have been more than 20 drugs approved by the FDA, new drugs approved by the FDA for the treatment of epilepsy. None of these drugs really have decreased very much the fraction of children with intractable epilepsy. So despite all this research in pharmacotherapy, we continue to have large groups of children with these bad seizure disorders. The cannabis compounds and the receptors in the brain that these compounds bind to have been studied for a long time as well. And there are studies that indicate that certain compounds in cannabis may actually help in controlling seizures. It's not all that easy to look at all the research. It is indeed research going back 50 years. There is cannabidiol, there is cannabidiol plus THC that people have been tried. There's been cannabis extracts, and so it's comparing apples and oranges very often, and it's very difficult for us to determine what is the right way to go. So of course in the last several years CBD has been the focus of attention. That seems to be the most promising compound coming out of the cannabis plant, and we all agree that the current process of trying to get that drug approved by FDA is the way to go. We also know that even if that drug appears to be effective, it's going to be several years before that will be approved and can be used for all these patients. So when you look at the cannabis oil that we are talking about today, there is not an awful lot of proof. There have not been any peer-reviewed publications. Peer-reviewed publications means that experts look at the research and determine that it is an effective way of treating patients. On the other hand, there is a lot of reports coming from families who have children with intractable epilepsy that clearly indicate that there is something to it. And so we as neurologists at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, we feel that this should become available, but we have to be sure that it's going to be delivered in a safely manner, that we are going to look at the effectiveness of it, and that we study adverse effects and outcomes. How that's going to be done remains to be discussed, but you cannot, I don't think you can legalize this product if we are not involved in a way where we can study it and can determine whether it really has a benefit to the children, for the children of these intractable epilepsy. Thank you very much.
Okay. Representative Pruitt.
You kind of sighed when you said that. Are you tired of me today?
No, just one. I'm just going to, we need. What did he say? What did you say, Joe?
I want to thank you so much.
How can you read my mind?
Thank you so much for coming, and what the Children's Hospital has done and meant even to me for the 8 years I've been here. It's just been a great joy to work with Mr. Tatum. The question I have, this Epidiolex and the cannabis, are they the same?
So the Epidiolex is a compound coming from cannabis. Cannabis is a plant,
Oh,
and the
yeah.
plant produces
The
many
oil.
Yeah, and so you can extract oil out of the plant, and the oil will contain a number of compounds called cannabinoids.
I'm sorry to interrupt you because she's going to cut us off. If
Okay.
But are the oil and the pedilect, is it the same?
No.
Except for the purity?
No. So the Pedialex is one compound. The oil is a
Okay.
mixture of many
So
compounds.
So when we compare getting some pedilect and trying it because it's been tested, but it seems like there's been very little proof. And on the other hand, we've got the cannabis oil that has been using, and we know for sure that it's working. So we're comparing apples and oranges there. It seems to me like, and I won't ask you to agree or disagree with that, but I will ask you this. If a child that has epilepsy has to go through brain surgery, and the odds of that compared to a child that you know is only going to live 8 months, and being concerned about the about mold or the purity of the cannabis oil, would not you agree that probably the mold would be a less likely risk than the brain surgery, and wouldn't quality of life be more important than the weight and what you would go through after brain surgery if you knew that you had a definite time period of life expectancy?
Yeah, I would not know that. I would agree that it's very worthwhile trying this oil for the children that have no other hope. On the other hand, it may not be all that difficult to get rid of the molds. I mean, don't you think it would be better to have this stuff without the mold?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But like you said, it doesn't seem that it would be that difficult. Thank you very much.
Okay, but Dr. DeGraw, let me ask you this question, and maybe David. It's my understanding to be a research institute, and correct me if I'm wrong, that in order for you to be approved for a clinical trial, you have to meet the regulations of the FDA.
Yeah,
Okay.
David should answer that.
Madam Chair, we do. In order to take the oil, and my understanding is Representative Pruitt that the University of Mississippi, as I heard in earlier testimony, does develop oil that is pure and available for research. And even if we got it from there, what I was informed of by my research director this morning is that we would still have to go to the FDA and apply for a investigational new drug permit, which is the IND acronym you've heard, and I guess negotiate and get with them as to how hard that would be and what kind of time limit would have to be involved. So in order to remain in compliance with all federal laws and regulations, we would have to do that.
So that CHOA or any other academic research institution would have to have an FDA-approved drug that's for the first clinical studies and all.
Well, we'd have to go and get an IND. Sorry, I'm getting this wrong.
Along with that, you have to go through the process.
We've got to go to the FDA and say we want to do an investigational new drug, and have to go through whatever process they've got in order for us to legitimately and kind of legally study it.
Okay, thank you. And that would mean a drug that they've approved.
I'm not sure of the particulars of that,
Yes.
but we'd have to deal with them.
I think it is. Okay. Representative Peake.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. DeGraw, thank you for being here today. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank you for the courageous step that Children's Hospital has taken in having an openness to evaluate this as an option for your patients. I think that's a very bold move and shows a lot of compassion and insight, and so thank you for that. You and I had a conversation the other day, and I just want to kind of ask the question again that I asked you and I chatted about. In your expertise, which is vast, assuming you could be sure that Charlotte's Web was available and was tested and clean, if you will, of mold, would you be recommending using Charlotte's Web, again, if it's clean and pure, if you will, would you be recommending that to patients that you currently have at the children's hospitals?
I would recommend the oil if it's safe, if we can measure effectiveness, and if we can measure adverse effects and outcome. I think that has to be part of all of this. I think to just prescribe it without looking at these components, that I would not agree with that. That would be wrong in my opinion.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Grohl.
Pardon? Who? Representative Reinders.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the author of the bill, I've heard the word openness and open-minded and so forth. I firmly reject that if somehow we don't always agree on something, it's a lack of open-mindedness. I think that we have a job to do, and that is on each and every bill, whether it's something that deals with a sensitive subject matter like this or not. We have a job to do to make sure that we get the best finished product. And if we don't agree with it, that doesn't mean we're closed-minded on anything. And that's an argument I almost would want off the table. Another argument I'd want off the table is if it were your child. As a father of 3, there's nothing I wouldn't do. There's nothing I wouldn't do for my babies. But we still have a legislative job to do. That's the exact reason why you tighten it up. That's the exact reason why we try to give them the best bill we can possibly give them. And I just hope, to add some context here, is that we still have a legislative job to do. It's not a matter of closed-mindedness. It's not a matter of not loving our children, or if it was someone else's children. I agree with you. We got to study it. If my child smoked whatever it is y'all call it, a big joint this big, and it helped them get, I'd say go for it. But we have to do this with a certain amount of pragmatism to make sure that we do what's in the best interest of everybody. And I just wanted to make those comments. I wanted to say it the last time. The film, if someone's wanting to sell marijuana candy to children, that gives me a context. It puts me in a position with them. I'm a free adult, we all are, to make our mind, and it goes to our context. We shouldn't be browbeat on whether we're open-minded or sensitive. I told the lady the other day, where are you at today? The lady that called me to the rope, and she's about broke my heart. And I says, you know what, I just want to get it right. I want to help every child we can. I do, but we have a job to do. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. DeGraw, thanks for being here. If Representative Peake can get it here legally and maybe through Mississippi or however, would you like to be a part of the randomized controlled trials or double-blinded placebo-controlled trials?
Yeah, we would very much like to be part of that, obviously. We have so many patients that seem to possibly benefit from it.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Watson, in trying to do my due diligence as chairman of this committee and about this bill, like I try to do for all bills, it is my understanding, and David is not a researcher, that to do clinical trials and not lose their federal funding, they would have to use a drug that is approved by the FDA for at least beginning clinical studies. And Charlotte's Web does not meet that application. Now, that's my understanding, that that's what garners any research institution in trying to do diligence. I'm sure they're looking into it.
Yeah, I mean, David, we certainly, Mr. Tatum and Dr. DeGraw, I don't think the state of Georgia or anybody up here wants you to lose your accreditation or affiliation by any means. But if we can get it here, you'd like to do it.
Right.
Thank you.
If it's appropriate, yes.
If it's appropriate. Representative Henson, let's make it quick here again. We need to move on. We still have 6 more people to testify.
Thank you. I just have a few quick questions. When you talk about you would do it if you could to test the trials, how long would the trials take?
Well, that's I'm not totally sure about that. So it takes some time to put it together, to review all the literature on positives and negatives of it that is available. and then selecting the patients. Plus, you need to have a certain period of time to follow the patients to make sure that there is an effect. In general, I would say you do follow-ups at least 6 months, better maybe 12 months. And you need a 12 month to get it started, so that's a 2-year period. That's just ballpark.
How long would a child such as Haley live? What's her life expectancy going to be?
I think that's difficult to tell. So some children with severe epilepsy will not survive. Others will actually fluctuate, and seizure frequency will go down spontaneously. So it's sort of an up and down course. So I would not be able to really tell what the life expectancy is of any
Thank you.
particular patient.
Thank you very much. Representative Hawkins.
So let me sort of sum up. I apologize about being late, but it seems to me that we're in a conundrum here, and that is that we need to pass legislation, Madam Chair, that's advised by law. And here we find ourselves with a problem, FDA compliance, moving the drug into Georgia. But at the same time, we need to find some way to help folks that are on their last step. And I understand where you are. I hope somehow we can find an answer and solution for all of us. And I hope you would put your mind to that. You sound like a very intelligent man and caring man. So, hopefully when you leave here today, you will keep thinking about how we can help these people.
Right.
Yeah, I do agree that so if it is approved, it could still take a very long time before anybody could do anything with it in Georgia, and that is the major problem, at least in my thinking.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I think there's a person that can help us, since one of the problems is getting here, Mr. Allen, with drugs and narcotics for the state of Georgia. Thank you very much, Dr. DeGraw. Yeah. Who? Yeah, Dr. DeGraw, I mean, and Mr. Reinders is, Representative Reinders is questioning your accent. He doesn't think it's a South Georgia.
I didn't have a South Georgia twang. Okay.
North Georgia. Mr. Allen.
Yes, ma'am. I thought he was questioning my accent. I'm Rick Allen. As most of you know, I'm Director of Georgia Drugs and Narcotics Agency. We are charged with the regulation of pharmacies, physicians, and anybody that handles prescription drugs in this state. And we're also charged with inspecting the researchers in this state. We watch carefully what our researchers do. We do our inspections. But the elephant in the room that hasn't really been talked about today is the DEA. And there's been a line drawn in the sand with DEA in the states that have legalized marijuana. And as long as Colorado does what Colorado wants to do inside Colorado, that's okay. But once they cross that state line, they've crossed that line in the sand. And DEA could and would most likely make a illegal distribution charge against the Stanley brothers and whoever shipped it and whoever received the drug in Georgia. And they could rightfully seize it if it came here and was not approved. Now, the way the process works, a manufacturer of a product has a license from DEA to produce drugs. University of Mississippi, working through the National Institute of Drug Abuse, has the only legitimate marijuana farm in this country, and that was based on they call a single convention on narcotic drugs, where each country is allowed to have one place that legally grows marijuana for research. In that farm, it has a catalog. If you get on there and get through their websites, you can find their catalog of all the drugs they'll provide through NIDA. and cannabidiol is one of them. In order for the drug to be possessed by anyone in the state of Georgia, you would have to have a researcher permit for marijuana that's been approved by, theoretically, the Board of Pharmacy and us and FDA and DEA. Once, to the best of my knowledge, no one in Colorado has one of those DEA permits. So they could not legally produce it and ship it to anyone in Georgia. The researchers, such as the gentleman behind me, we were aware of the application that came across my desk last week, and we're going to expedite his IND to make sure they get approved, at least by us, as soon as possible. But in order for him to have it, he's got to have that permit. And it would have to come from either A, University of Mississippi NIDA form, or through what he's going to be doing is going through the GW Pharmaceuticals. And they would be providing these drugs free of charge for them to use. There are going to be 15 clinical trials around the country. What I've been told by GW is they will expand the program to include as many people as the FDA and they would allow. What I have talked with GW about is they said, remember, we're a startup research company. We don't make a profit at this point. We can only produce so much of this drug, but we don't have the money to keep producing a bunch of it. And we're going to have money from somewhere to be able to produce it and provide it. So at this point, that's where we stand. That the drugs from Colorado could not come into Georgia legally. No one here could. I don't want to see Children's Health Care have a raid from DEA, and I sure don't want a raid from the DEA. So if there are any questions, Madam Chairman.
Okay, but let me clarify. What you are saying is that if the researchers go through the process of getting approval, we could get the Epidiolex that's the 100% CBD.
Well, 98.
98. Okay, and we could get that for approved research.
Right.
Right.
We're going to have it in Georgia as soon as we get the paperwork done. Okay. In fact, we're going to go out and visit the good doctor because I want to see what he's doing. I just want to see what he's doing.
Okay, doctor, if you have any trouble, Dr. Fellini, if he gives you a hard time, you let me know because he's just coming for a visit to see, the kind of research you're doing.
Yeah,
it's not a drug raid.
Don't get nervous.
Don't get nervous when somebody comes from drugs and narcotics. So what you're saying, we can get that kind that's been approved by DEA, but we cannot get into the state legally.
No, ma'am.
Charlotte's Web.
The only source is University of Mississippi have to be FDA approved grant or through Epidiolex through GW Pharmaceutical.
Okay. Representative Peake.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Allen, personally, I want to thank you. You've been a great source of information for me over the last 5 weeks and couldn't have had a better attitude about a lot of hard questions that I had. So thank you personally.
I've learned a lot more about marijuana in 5 weeks than I ever thought I would.
Well, we both have, and thank you for what a great resource you've been, for what you've done for our state too for a long time. Is it not true though? And I want to kind of just, you and I have had this discussion a little bit. That this situation in our country is incredibly fluid regarding this issue. That while you're right now today, we can't ship Charlotte's Web from Colorado to Georgia without breaking a multitude of laws. There has been a farm bill that passed last week, signed by the president, I believe, that actually allows growing of hemp, which is low in THC. So possibly even that Charlotte's Web would be considered hemp. Okay, just stay with me for a second. So as well as the fact that 20 other states have passed medical marijuana laws and 13 other states are looking at it, is it not true that if we have a structure in place, if we pass this bill and have a structure in place that would allow, by state law, Charlotte's Web or a strand like that
into Georgia, that we could be prepared if there is some relaxing of DEA regulations or law, even passed by Congress, or even an executive order by President Obama, that would allow cannabidiol oil to be transported from state to state. Isn't that true that if we have it in place, we would be ready for that if we pass this bill?
I'm not sure if we would be ready or not. The process to do all of this is very complex. And again, I've been a regulator too many years, and I've seen what DEA and FDA can do to people. And I don't want to subject anyone here to that. If Georgia laws change, that's possible. But where are you going to get the seeds? Even if the seeds come from Colorado, the seeds are considered a Schedule 1 controlled substance.
Right.
You can't even have the seeds.
Right.
And so unless you want me to turn my head and not look.
No, sir, I'm not asking that. Okay. Just one quick follow-up. And Mr. Allen, you know, I sure wouldn't ask that, and I sure don't want to put you at risk at all. But isn't that true that there is a possibility that, okay, if there were changes in current federal law, that we would be prepared under this scenario, under our bill, to be able to receive it? Or second, that we are working on potential measures to be able to get the product from Mississippi, and that is a viable option for us possibly to be able to get it from the federally approved program at Ole Miss.
Right. If DEA relaxes their rules, yeah.
I mean, Representative Peake, is this not what we discussed, and one of the things that we said could be included in a revised edition of the bill, that we would put in it that if it should be the changes that where Charlotte's oil, or what is really called REM oil afterwards, and that would meet the federal regulations at any time, that it could also be considered for.
Right.
I think we discussed that.
Right. Sure. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Representative Watson.
Just thank you
Yes,
again.
sir.
We certainly appreciate your the information that you have. So it sounds like it's broken down into two, like Representative Peake outlined. University of Mississippi, if DEA or FDA relaxes their rules, versus the Epidiolex.
Yes, sir.
Does the DEA FDA need to relax their rules?
Yes, sir. The FDA, the way it's been explained to me, they could do an expedited IND, but that's still going to take 4 or 5 years.
Wow.
Versus the 7 to 8 it normally takes.
Oh, thank you. Wow. What's the average cost of a drug coming to market?
A lot.
Is it? I remember $750 to almost $1 billion.
I would say it's close to over $1 billion.
Wow. Wow.
But you're only talking, well, yes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen.
Yes.
Representative Bailey, last question for, I think, for Mr. Who? Okay, Representative Beverly?
Over here.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yes,
Two quick questions.
Oh,
Number one is, it's a Schedule 1 drug, so you can't do anything with it. If it went to Schedule 2, there's some talk that marijuana may go to Schedule 2, but we have a little bit more flexibility if it goes to Schedule 2.
Correct.
Okay. Second question is, if we decriminalize it, then would that solve our problem? I mean, we can get it now. So if you took the criminal element out of it,
On the state level.
on a state level, they could bring it in, and you don't have the criminal element associated with it. Is there an opportunity there to do that?
You still got, just remember DEA standing over here watching everything you're doing.
Okay.
And if it shows up into Georgia, then they're going to want to know, you know, they have their ways of, they're not the big bad people, but they, like I said, they're letting leniency in certain states to do things, but I don't know what they would do if we did that.
Representative Beverly, the feds have said that they will, not look at certain things in Colorado, but they had, I think, a list of 8 things that they were very specific they would go after. And the first thing on that list, I believe, is that if it is exported from the state, then the federal government will go after them. So they've legalized it in Colorado, but they're pretty strict about what will.
Yeah, they did a search or a raid and arrest in California recently, where a medical marijuana store was distributing, and they went after them very shortly.
I've also learned more about medical marijuana than I ever want to know in doing my due diligence as the chairman of this committee before I bring a bill. So Representative Hawkins.
You and I have known each other for a long time, and I know how good you are and how knowledgeable you are. So let me ask you this question. In your opinion, professional opinion, would DEA or FDA or anyone else go after an individual in this state if they have obtained the oil in some way, possibly not legal, but if they had the oil, giving it to their children?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Thank
you. They're only going to go after the distributors.
Which they could do.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
And where they get it, and close them down completely.
So,
So anybody that would take it into the state of Georgia and bring it into the state would then put the Stanley people at great risk,
yes.
Of being closed down completely.
Well, I don't think they close them down completely, but they'd make life pretty miserable
for them. So, Representative Reinders.
Thank you. Thank you, and it's good to see you again, Mr. Allen. I'd just like to go down the path of the decriminalization. If there was a constitutional amendment so specific as to state, shall Georgia not allow children with severe seizures to suffer by allowing the growth of a certain strain of medical cannabis for the use specifically to relieve those with those seizures. I'm not an attorney, so y'all give me a little wiggle room on that. Would that, in your humble opinion, give us a little protection, and comma, not for the purposes of being distributed outside the state? Would that give us the political cover that we may need with Washington?
I would have to defer to the attorneys, but, it's
What do you think? You like it or not? Is it worth a shot?
It's worth a shot.
Representative Reinders?
Ma'am?
There's also a second floor in this building. Over in the building across the hall.
Well,
And the other across
Madam
the
Chair,
hall
I'd
from
like to
us.
say that would not be introduced anytime before this election.
Anytime like that, so. Okay, thank you. You may be digging in deeper. So, there's not only is there a second floor, there's across the hall from us another body of the legislative body. Ms. Tinker, Karen Tinker. Ms. Tinker, if will tell us why you're here and who you. Thank you for coming.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Karen Tinker, and my son is Jason. He's had intractable epilepsy for the last 10 years. He was diagnosed with epilepsy in 2004 at the age of 3. He had no head trauma, no fever, and no explanation for his seizures. He was poked and prodded all over his body for places for IVs to be put, on his foot, on his hand, in his arm, all over the place, because of thrashing associated with seizures. He was potty trained when he went into the hospital, but after being put in a catatonic state with anti-seizure medications, he began to lose control of both his bladder and his bowels, and he couldn't even recognize myself or my husband. That was catastrophic for us as parents. He spent 10 days in the PICU, and we were advised as parents to put him in a medically induced coma to rest his brain. Basically, my child was a guinea pig because there is no cure for epilepsy. Everyone reacts differently to anti-seizure drugs or combination of drugs, thus creating trial and error dosing that sometimes takes time to see what works and for whom and for how long. Over the years, our seizures have changed personalities. Some are shorter, some are longer. Some are violent, and as my son has grown, so has the physicality of his seizures. Last year, he fractured his arm at school when seizing, and he fractured his ribs when he slammed a table into his abdomen during a seizure at school. Over the years, we've always been told that if seizures are not controlled with one medication, you run the risk when combining a second or even a third drug due to the potential side effects of the toxic cocktail. For those of you who have been on seizure medications for a while, you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes the side effects are just as bad as the seizures. I know I wish I could go back in time and get my beautiful 3-year-old back with no health problems, but I can't. So as a family, we move on and deal with the situation we have. We have received treatment in Virginia, Massachusetts, and Georgia for epilepsy. So we've had the opportunity to see many neurologists and ask many questions over options of treatment over the years. We have taken 12 anti-seizure medications, all with varied side effects and all with varied control of seizures. We still have daily seizures. Almost every morning we awake to a loud and violent thrashing of a seizure. It's not a cup of coffee, but trust me, it will wake you up and get you flying out of the bed. Make no mistake. We also have brief periods with no seizures. There's no explanation for this. I can't tell you if the medicine worked for a period of time or if it worked at all. We've had breaks in seizures both on and off medication over the past 10 years. To date, Jason's epilepsy is classified as intractable. Last month we moved forward and he had a VNS or vagus nerve stimulation implant through Children's Hospital, Dr. Fulminant and Dr. Chern. Our VNS decision was a 3-year journey with neuropsych evaluations, MRIs, EEGs, sleep studies, talking to doctors, reviewing VNS literature, videos, and looking at the statistical data that is provided by the FDA approval of this device and the treatment of epilepsy, especially in kids. That was very important to us as parents. We are not terminally ill. We do not have a feeding tube, but we do have challenges. We have challenges that we face daily with epilepsy and uncontrolled seizures. Would I like to see a cure for epilepsy? Of course. I'm a parent. Who wouldn't? But I don't want to condone reckless trial and error use of a drug such as marijuana without proper documentation of what it will do to my child when it's induced or combined with his current medicine. I took the time to highlight or show you tabs of my VNS booklet. One of the things as a parent that I do is I look at the side effects and the potential risks. There's something in here that says it's not a cure for epilepsy. It shows me the analysis of the medical device reported to the FDA over a period of time. It tells me about how many people died for the VNS implant. It also tells me about the injuries that are associated and the effectiveness of it. It's not a 100% chance that my son's epilepsy will go away with this implant, but it was enough of a chance that we were willing to take to move forward and hope that his quality of life improved. In addition, when my son gets prescribed a medication, I take notes in my doctor's appointment and I write down, I go back and research. We live in the day of the internet. We can look up. Is the internet 100% accurate in all cases? No. But I can go to a tool and I can look up if he's taken X drug and combine it with Y drug, what are the potential side effects and look over. I am not a doctor, but before I give something to my child, I'm going to make sure it provides the least possible harm to him. I feel that's my maternal duty as a mom. This is a NDA brochure on Onfi. This was a drug that was issued to my son within the last 6 months. It's a drug that's for Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. I opted not to take this drug for my child. The reason, it may increase the risk of suicidal thoughts and behavior. It may increase depression, mood or behavior, or thoughts of self-harm. My son is now 13 years old. Those are big, pivotal things for me at that age. He's very volatile. I thought that those risks were not going to outweigh the benefits of possibly inducing that with his other medication regimen. So I opted not to do that. Am I a bad parent? No, I just considered all my options at the time. Now, why am I here today? Some people might want to know. First and foremost, I'm here for my son. I'm also here for the children who might not be able to speak for themselves regarding what medicine gets put into their body. I feel like with 10 years experience as a parent of a child with epilepsy, I do have a voice that should be heard. Finally, for other Georgians who may not have researched epilepsy and CBD to the same extent that I have, I applaud Dr. Fulminant for taking the leap of faith for his kids. He is my neurologist. I've had conversations with him about marijuana, maybe not specifically to give it to my child because I'm not ready for that. However, I applaud him for his efforts and the milestones that he and Children's Healthcare are doing. What I'm concerned with as a parent is the vial that was shown earlier. Today, it's not labeled. It doesn't say anything about side effects. It doesn't say what's going to happen to my child. It doesn't have dosing requirements listed on it like a regular prescription. Those are concerning issues to me as a parent. Maybe not everybody, but that is for me. In the last year, since 2013 when Sanjay Gupta went on the TV, my phone, my email, and my text started blowing up. Why? Because everyone knows across the country that is familiar with me that my son suffers from epilepsy. And their impression based on that documentary is that marijuana is the cure. Of course, as a parent, I wanted to start looking at it. For several months, I'd been researching, reviewing, and asking questions to those who I feel are experts in their field and who have good statistical data to answer the questions that I have. What I found with Charlotte's Web was stumbled upon by the Fijis and Stanleys, like you talked about earlier, and there was no solid research available to solidify that the use of that oil would be beneficial for all children with epilepsy. And I want to put the emphasis on all. I did not find a study, but I did read on the Realm of Caring website that statements were not evaluated by the FDA. That's important to me as a parent, so I almost closed the door, but I continued to do my due diligence because it was a hot topic. Again, this is definitely concerning to me. As a parent, you are in essence rolling the dice when you give this oil to your child. Don't overlook that. What would happen if a child died when they were given this oil? Would a parent be guilty of a crime? During the self-discovery of Charlotte's oil, did Charlotte ever get high due to the THC content when experimenting? That's something I would like to know the answer to. If the answer is yes or maybe, to me it's not okay as a parent. I feel strongly that my child should not be a guinea pig or a test rat. My child's brain is already fragile due to his disease and history of seizures, and I would not take the risk on his behalf without studies documenting. What I'm asking for today is child advocacy, for you to look for the research. Dr. Fulminant is well known. He's putting out there to get the study for Epidiolex. Let it go through the process and let the research stand for itself. 5 years from now, I would like to be the parent who reviews those results and say if it's 50% of greater value medicinally, maybe that's a point where I will take a look at it for my child. I'm not going to be the one that raises my hand to let them test it out. There are other people in this room who need the immediate gratification of that drug. Let them try it, but let them do it in a controlled manner so that other patients suffering from epilepsy have the benefit of seeing the results of this down the road. Today there is no cure. People are willing to step forward, but do it under the right methods. I urge you to consider that. When you search medical marijuana in Georgia on Google, you will come up with a company, and I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce it correctly, Halicon, and it's all ready to start selling marijuana edibles. Who is this targeted at? There's cookies and lollipops. In my mind, that's kids. It's the kids we're putting at risk if you don't carefully consider all factors when writing and improving this law. I think the potential harm of it being a gateway to smoking and producing edibles is an immediate concern. I'm not saying it's a gateway to other drugs. I'm saying it's a gateway to smoking and producing edibles. The American Academy of Pediatrics issued a statement in 2004 showing marijuana is the most commonly abused drug by adolescents. Any change in the legal status of marijuana, even limited to adults, could affect the prevalence of use among adolescents. Most recently, a study showed that 23% of high school students have used marijuana recently. Why is that concerning to me? Because my son is now a teenager living with epilepsy during a stage in his life that is already challenging without any medical conditions. As he's going through puberty and adjusting to peer pressure, he's going to be faced with challenges that other teenagers do not. One challenge that affects everyone is drug use. I've always worked hard to explain to Jason what can happen if he experiments with smoking pot or eating pot brownies because of his high dose of anti-seizure meds. I did this as a concerned parent over the years, but now all he sees on the TV in the headlines in Georgia is legalize marijuana. Okay? It's just the headlines, the big bold print. And there's medicinal value for those dealing with epilepsy. That's a double whammy for me as a mom. Jason is not tuned into the publishing of the law, let alone the fine prints that spell out CBD and its usage. All he knows is what the TV shows. Jason takes a heavy dose of medication that slows down the processing of his functions in his brain, thus putting him at risk when other drugs are introduced, whether it's legal or not. Jason's seizures affect the frontal lobe of his brain, where his executive functions takes place, such as memory, reasoning and judgment, problem solving, and planning, which again creates concerns regarding legalizing marijuana headlines. Will he make the right choice when he's offered a joint, or will he rely on the reckless advocacy he sees on the TV news or social media? If you look at alcohol statistics in teens, you will see what I'm showing concerns for is a very real possibility. It's the perception versus reality cliche which puts kids at Georgia at risk, and those with epilepsy have compounded risk. Putting a law into place today without heavy restrictions and clear education to the public provides zero reassurance to me as a parent on whether or not my son will become a casualty in this situation. Now, I understand that CBD may save Charlotte's life, or it has provided an improvement in her situation for now. But I don't think we can sacrifice the other kids without a study that shows its proof of safe and effectiveness for all children. There needs to be precautions in place, such as education for children in schools prior to the law going into effect. I'm praying for you all to think of scenarios through before you open Pandora's box. The negative effects may far outweigh the positives, and without proper studies, you simply don't know. And legal doesn't necessarily mean safe. How we respond to this bill is anything but clear. Most politicians are not experts on marijuana in any form, drug use or drug abuse. In the absence of some personal knowledge, they may turn to others for information they need to make decisions, like constituents or even worse, those in favor of legal marijuana. This doesn't necessarily make their decisions wrong, but it can be difficult for a politician to make the best choice for Georgia. Please keep in mind those who have products to sell or an emotional investment in the result when passing the law. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And to the person who questioned me about allowing this witness to go forward in the audience, and to members, I did that because with Ms. Figge and the people that testified on that and Mr. Smith, there was about 15 minutes of testimony from other families. And so therefore, I thought that Ms. Tinker should not be called down and shortened her time. So that is why I allowed. Thank you very much for your testimony. Obviously, you are very concerned about the safety for your child and have another view to that. Is there any questions from the committee? We are losing people now. We have other people. Thank you very much. Dr. Gaskin and Mr. Wade, would it be possible for you all to come back another day?
No.
Okay, therefore, which one are you?
I'm Dr. Gaskin.
Okay, Dr. Gaskin, come forward then. And Dr. Let's see. And Mr. Wade, you said you could come back another day? Okay, then fine. After Dr. Gaskin, we will adjourn and we will let other people talk when we have another meeting. I'm sorry, we seem to have lost a lot of our committee, but we've been at this for over 3 hours now. Thank you, Dr. Gaskin.
Members of the committee, thank you for allowing us to make a statement regarding the House Bill 885. I'm the president of the Georgia chapter of the American Society of Addiction Medicine, assistant clinical professor of medicine for Medical College of Georgia, and advisory board member of the Georgia Prescription Drug Monitoring Program. This is Dr. Blank, my colleague. And Dr. Blank is board certified by the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology and the American Board of Addiction Medicine. Now, the hour grows late. We in addiction medicine are kind of used to being the caboose of the train. When they go and get stuff, people look to us. We represent the American Society of Addiction Medicine, the national leaders in addiction medicine policy from physicians. We come to make 4 points today. First, do no harm. We have a system in this country designed for evaluating the safety, effectiveness, and indications for medications. Now, I'm getting old, but I remember the swine flu vaccine. We heard somebody talk about mold in medicine today. Now, I remember what happened was our epidemiologists were expecting, after 40 years from the 1917 pan epidemic that killed millions of Americans, they thought they were going to have a killer flu. So they threw away the safeguards and they pushed fast. The government guaranteed that the vaccine companies wouldn't get charged if something went wrong. And sure enough, when I came into medical practice, we were still seeing people that were victims of the swine flu, the Guillain-Barré syndromes, the deaths, the other problems from rushing, putting this normal standards of safety aside, pushing for going this through, and we're still seeing the fallout and fear of safe and effective vaccines to this day that has harmed the safety of Americans. Number two, we have a system for proper dispensing and management of patient access to approved medications. 3, there are current NIH trials specifically designed to evaluate, monitor, and treat patients, especially children suffering from serious intractable seizures. 4, opening the door to access to marijuana outside of safe and appropriate patient management represents a serious public safety issue for citizens of Georgia. The issue of medical marijuana is an emotional one. On one hand, advocates, many of whom advocate for the legislation of marijuana for any purpose, claim marijuana is a miracle drug that can cure cancer, help alleviate pain, and ease the suffering of millions. On the other hand, there are people who claim marijuana has no medicinal properties whatsoever. The scientific fact is that while there are medicinal components in crude herbal marijuana, which is smoked, vaporized, eaten, etc., this doesn't make it a medication. It's not undergone the FDA process for demonstrating safety and efficacy, and no national medical association supports its use. We realize there are some people who claim that they cannot wait for the FDA to approve marijuana-based medications, and that's why we support the federal IND program currently allowing doctors of parents who have children with intractable epilepsy to obtain a pure, properly tested, and standardized medication containing a pure CBD product. I've cut this testimony short for the time, but we'll have our statement for everyone to review. We talk a lot about some of the issues that Ms. Tinker mentioned about medical marijuana and how doctors have become entangled in some of these things that go in very unpredictable directions. In conclusion, most of medical groups we are part of have reiterated several times that marijuana should be subject to the same standards that are applicable to other prescription medicines, and that these products should not be distributed or otherwise provided to patients unless and until such products or devices have received marketing approval from the Food and Drug Administration. ASAM, the AMA, and other groups reject smoking as a means of drug delivery since it is not safe. We also reject a process where state and local ballot initiatives approve medications because individuals not qualified to make such decisions are deciding these initiatives. We have brought with us a compendium of medical organizations' positions on this matter. Georgia has a choice. It can listen to marijuana advocates or to scientists. As scientists, we strongly recommend Georgia does not go down the path of creating a state-based system for administering medical marijuana, and that parents with children who need relief today enroll in the NIH programs available to them. Thank you very much.
Okay. Are there questions? Representative Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, Dr. Gaskin. Dr. Gaskin and I were in our residency together just a couple of years ago. He was a year ahead of me. He was a great teacher. Thank you. So randomized controlled trials, that's where it should be done, right?
That's what we believe. We should follow the investigational drug trials.
Right. That's and I agree. So the INDs, y'all are supportive of that, and thank you very much.
Absolutely.
I'm not aware of any NIH trials, but let me just for my education, you know, looking back to folic acid and homocysteine and vitamin E, and now vitamin D is the most popular thing right now, and you know, and testosterone's probably got to be close, you know, not too far behind. But so with most of the times, like with folic acid and homocysteine, vitamin E and lung cancer and heart disease and antioxidants, there are no companies that are doing up-to-date trials because there are no companies that do vitamins that do a significant amount of money to do that. And that's where the National Institutes of Health gets involved to do the drug studies, because that is at the best interest. But I'm not aware of, are there any trials for in the NIH that are doing cannabidiol?
They're supporting the INDs for the product that's coming out of London.
They're supporting that, but they're not paying like they did with folic acid or homocysteine. No. Okay, I just didn't know whether I was aware of that.
There is a pharmaceutical basis, and there is a way for universities and academic centers to be able to recoup some of the money involved in this trial.
Now, personally, I will tell you, I agree with you. I think there should be some NIH trials on this because it is in the best interest to find, you know, whether, you know, we need some randomized control trials. That's another option, but obviously that's not happening. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions? I think your testimony would be in this yellow folder, and this yellow folder is for everybody to take with you, if I'm correct, since we had to cut you short. Thank you very much for coming, I think from Savannah.
From Savannah, yes. Dr. Watson and I go way back. Thank you, Ben.
You've got about a month from now, big celebration going to be going down there. Getting ready for it.
I'm retired from that. But
okay. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry we're so late. Okay, with that, since the rest of the presenter, I'm sure Rick Ward can come back, and if Representative Hamilton's here or anybody who had a question, they can come back. We will schedule another meeting. Here again, depending on the weather and for the committee, if we can meet on Thursday, we will. If we are not here on Thursday, we will reschedule a meeting. Thank you for your patience, and thank you to the committee members that stayed.
Good job, man.